Chapter 728. In the depths of the labyrinthine cave, the tremors above her head were getting louder and louder. Pasha knew that they were approaching in large numbers and in a menacing manner. She put her limbs into the soil and spread upward. Then she saw what was happening outside the mountain. Dark demonic beasts were running among the mountains. Several entrances to the maze ruins were blocked by the strong fearful beasts of hell. The demonic hybrids following them were tearing the bodies and organs of the fearful beasts crazily until they opened a new passage. If they did not do this, they would be squeezed to death by other demonic beasts at the entrance of the cave. But it would not be long before the passage was blocked again. The way to unblock it was to repeat the previous process. As a result, before the demonic beasts entered the core area of the ruins, the scene at the entrance was already like a purgatory of flesh and blood. The underground was also not peaceful. The wilderness beasts were passing through. Their mouths full of sharp teeth were the most effective digging tools. Their greasy and moist skin made it easy for them to wriggle underground. Their long bodies carried a large number of symbiotic hybrids. Once these monsters broke through the defense line, they would often cause heavy casualties to the defenders. Even mutated flying beasts appeared in the sky. However, they could not enter the ruins and could only hover and howl in the air. This was an indescribable experience. She clearly did not personally witness all of this, but regardless of whether it was the hissing above the mountains, the trembling of the ground, or the sound of the earth rubbing against each other, they were all accurately transmitted into her brain through the thousands of tentacles, forming countless vivid and lifelike images. This was the largest demonic beast attack since the beginning of winter. Pasha withdrew her limbs and sank deeper into the ground. From time to time, some fine soil fell from the top of the cave and hit the braziers on both sides of the passage. She could see every stone in the ground without the fire, but her companions who had been transformed into God's punishment army needed it. However, at this moment, everyone had moved to the hall of the maze, so she put out the fire in the brazier. "What's the situation up there?" As soon as they entered the hall, Alethia's voice rang in their minds. "The wilderness beasts nearest to us have almost broken through to the 3rd level." Pasha's answer was projected into everyone's consciousness. "What's the situation down there?" "Nothing unusual," Alethea replied. "But I saw a few charred bodies." Since Pasha had gotten a new body, her understanding of combat had changed greatly. The flat world suddenly became three-dimensional. Since the enemy could move freely underground, the survivors must always pay attention to the situation under their feet. As long as they were not standing at the end of the abyss, they should not ignore the hidden threats. Fortunately, there was a flowing river of magma below the ruins, which sealed most of the bottom of the labyrinth, saving them a lot of trouble. At present, there were no demonic beasts that were not afraid of fire. "How long until the instrument of divine retribution is ready?" Pasha looked at Celine. "I don't know. Half an hour? Maybe 2 hours?" Eleanor's anxious voice came from the magic core. "I've tried my best, but the damage in Area 43 has just been repaired. Lady Eleanor needs time to calculate." "Don't worry, they won't be able to come so quickly," she comforted him. "The large demonic hybrids will be stuck outside the cave. Leave the smaller demonic beasts to us." "You're right, just treat it as a daily practice," Elena said. "With us here, the demonic beasts won't be able to break into the hall. Actually, I don't think we should retrieve the relics so quickly. Isn't it better to let Starfall City waste some time first?" someone said. "Then they have to guard Hermes. Without the gods' punishment army, those mortals are useless," Alethea retorted. "The city wall can effectively block the demonic beasts, and the kerosene and catapults can still deal a heavy blow to those beasts. We just have to hide in the pivotal secret temple and wait for them to break into the city to retrieve the relics. There are hidden traps under the cathedral. What if they trigger the collapse trap? It's a small matter if we are buried alive, but if the relics fall into the hands of the demons, we're finished. No matter what, we can't afford to take this risk." "Stop arguing," Pasha interrupted. "Since we've retrieved the relics, there's no other way. have you forgotten what Lady Natalia said? Arguments should only be made before making a choice. No matter what decision we make, we shouldn't regret it. After she spoke, no one else's consciousness rang out again. Obviously, they agreed with her statement. In the tequila era, such a situation would not occur. Inferior witches had to obey their superiors unconditionally, and those who disobeyed would be severely punished. The most serious dispute in the union was between Natalia and Alice. Before breaking off with Starfall City, Natalia had said the above words to all her followers, and then attacked the Queen of Starfall City. Since then, the tequila survivors were no longer divided into superiors and subordinates, and disputes gradually increased. But Pasha didn't mind it at all. She preferred a vibrant organization to a cold system. Just as they changed the topic and discussed how to block the demonic beasts, Pasha suddenly felt a strange message coming from one of her tentacles. Violent tremors echoed in the rock stratum, as if something heavy had fallen. The speed was so fast that it seemed there was no obstacle. It broke through several layers of the labyrinth, and after a few seconds, it was already approaching the depths of the temple. How is this possible? The ground was filled with dense soil and rocks. Even a wasteland beast would need to spend several minutes to dig a single layer down. This was not the surface, so how could it move so quickly? Pasha hurriedly moved more tentacles in the direction of the movement. The more tentacles she monitored in an area, the more images she received. Then her heart suddenly sank. No one knew when, but a 6 to 7 mile long crack had appeared in this area, splitting the earth into two. At first glance, it looked like a cliff that stretched out from the ground. A wild beast had drilled through the mountain wall and rolled all the way down, landing right above the temple. Prepare to fight the enemy. Pasha raised the voice of her consciousness to the maximum. The direction of the magic core. Just when everyone was slightly stunned, the stone slab at the top of the hall suddenly cracked, and a long wild beast slid down from the crack. Its body was covered with scratches and bruises, but under the reflection of the magic core, its body emitted a dark blue light. Obviously, the fall had caused great damage to it, but even so, it still used its last breath to complete its mission. Chapter 729. No! Pasha shouted. Celine pulled out her tentacles from the instrument of divine retribution and knocked down two demonic hybrids. Then she was bitten by the other demonic beasts. A few wounds immediately appeared on its sarcoma-like body, and scales and gray body fluid splattered everywhere. A few agile wolf-like mutants even climbed up her rough skin and tried to bite the main tentacles at the top of her head. The other witches drew their swords to help. Elena was the first to arrive. Like a silver light, she cut the demonic hybrids in half and then rushed into the demonic beasts to kill them. Wherever she went, blue blood splattered. The monsters that mortals feared were no better than ordinary beasts when faced with Scourge, who was not inferior to an extraordinary. In the early stage, they were at a disadvantage in both strength and speed. As more and more witches joined the battle, the demonic beasts were killed one by one, and the chaos finally subsided. Pasha retracted all her tentacles and quickly ran to the center of the hall, her heart in her throat. Unlike the gods' punishment witches who could change their bodies at will, they could not change into a new body after entering the tumor-like body. Once their bodies were on the verge of death, they could only choose to merge with Lady Eleanor. If it were Pasha herself, she would not mind such an ending. Ever since she decided to follow Lady Natalia, she was ready to sacrifice herself at any time. But Celine could not. Among the survivors, she was the only one who had the deepest understanding of the magic core. Once they merged, they would not be able to activate the instrument of divine retribution for a long time. Are you okay? Pasha asked nervously as she landed beside the scarred tumor-like body. Well, it's not a big problem. Celine's reply made her feel relieved. As long as the holes in my body are blocked, I'll be fine. But a few of my tentacles were bitten off. It hurts so much. You should be grateful that you can still experience pain. I can't wait to relive the feeling of pain, someone shouted. That's right. If Phyllis heard this, she would be envious. Unfortunately, she can only get it from the spirit. Don't say that. She only serves the mortals for the sake of tequila, Elena said with a frown. She should be called number 76 now, right? I wonder how the Chosen One project is going. How long has it been? It's no longer the era when the Union ruled the whole territory. It's not easy to contact the witches who are hiding. We have to hold on for at least 2 to 3 years. Or we can hold on until the arrival of the bloody moon, and then be devoured by the army of demons, someone added. Damn it, do I have to say it out loud? His words caused everyone to roar with laughter. Calm down. We're not out of trouble yet, Alethea said angrily. What should we do now? There's a hole on the top of our heads. If one falls, the second one will fall. Should we split into a group and guard the bottom of the hole? Pasha thought for a moment and then rejected this suggestion. No, it's okay if the demonic beasts that have landed are fighting with the witches who stayed behind, but what if they turn around and attack the periphery? That way, the people guarding the entrances would be in danger of being attacked from both sides. Even with Scourge's power, it would still be dangerous. I agree with Pasha. Elena nodded. Moreover, we will be easily separated and surrounded by the demonic beasts. We won't even have a way out. Instead of fighting separately, it's better to gather in one place and guard the relic and the core in the center of the hall. As long as Celine repairs the instrument of divine retribution, we can all survive. I agree. Me too. No matter what, it's better than being bitten to death by demonic beasts from behind. Then let's do this. Pasha waved her tentacles. Give up the bottom hole and focus on defending the magic core. This was equivalent to facing a swarm of demonic hybrid beasts in the center of the empty hall. Undoubtedly, what they had to face next would be a hard battle. The only fortunate thing was that the fearful beasts of hell, which were too large and strong, and the unpredictable flying species could not go deep into the maze. Otherwise, the situation would be 100 times worse. However, she was a little worried. The number of demonic beasts was too astonishing, and the gods' punishment witches did not have unlimited physical strength. If the instrument of divine retribution could not be repaired for a long time, could they really block so many monsters? If she had known this earlier, she would not have let Celine continue to test the core during the months of demons, at least not this most important core. An hour later, the demonic beasts finally appeared at the bottom of the maze, and the battle began. All the witches did their best. There was no doubt that the outcome of this battle would determine the survival of the human race. Pasha also joined the battle. She drew magma from the lava river and sprayed it on the heads of the black hybrid beasts. The hot and sticky red water ignited the monsters' furs, and the fire was so fierce that the air was filled with a burning smell. Even so, they still rushed forward and insisted on charging toward the location of the relic. The gods' punishment witches formed a wall of flesh and blood with their bodies. As long as their heads were not injured, they would not really die. Therefore, this battle was extremely fierce. Even though their bodies were bitten to pieces, it did not prevent them from lying on the ground and cutting off the enemy's legs and abdomens. At this critical moment, Celine's excited voice came into everyone's mind. The core calculation has been completed. The magic mode has been adjusted to mutant annihilation, and the instrument of divine retribution is ready. Pasha, leave it to me. Go and activate it. Alethea spat out a mouthful of magma, forced the nearby demonic beasts to retreat, and jumped in front of Pasha. Among all the survivors, her key was second only to Lady Eleanor's, and it was also the thickest one among those who could activate the instrument. Pasha nailed the main tentacle to the stone slab above her head, and with a leap, she came close to the instrument of divine retribution. Based on her previous experience, she stretched out all her tentacles and tightly hugged the spindle-shaped core suspended in midair. In an instant, the magic power in her body swarmed out, and the dark cold light emitted from the skeleton of the instrument became brighter and brighter. She could feel her magic power condensing into a strange translucent polyhedron in the center of the spindle-shaped body. It was extremely complex, with countless edges and layers, almost indescribable in words. This is the mutant annihilation core, Pasha realized, just like the magic symbol of the senior witches, but with much more power. When the blue cold light turned into a dazzling pure white, the skeleton of the spindle-shaped body suddenly opened, and the center of the hall suddenly became as bright as day. Now! Celine shouted. Chapter 730. When the light wave passed through her body, Pasha felt a strange pulling force. The remaining magic power in her body was restless, as if it wanted to follow the light wave. The illusion of being forcibly separated only lasted for a few seconds. Soon, everything returned to normal. Along with the magic power, the whole hall also quieted down. Through the short tentacles on her back, she could see that in the area where the light wave swept through, the hybrid demonic beasts were frozen and then fell to the ground without a sound. This was the most efficient way of killing. Whether it was mud, rocks, or brick walls, nothing could stop the advance of divine wrath. Even without monitoring the ground, she could imagine the scene on the upper level of the labyrinth. The densely packed demonic hybrids would die like insects, and the magic that kept them alive would dissipate. Without the support of magic, their mutated bodies would instantly lose the ability to move. Of course, some ordinary demonic beasts with less mutation and almost no magic power could survive, but these mindless beasts could no longer threaten the safety of the relic. This time, Celine finally made it. Pasha pulled out the tentacles, panting, and looked at Aletheia. Go and see the situation on the surface. Then she moved to Elena's side. What's the situation? Elena was covered with blue and black blood. Half of her arm was gone, and her hair was soaked in sweat, as if she had just been fished out of a river. Fortunately, all of them are here. Pasha let out a sigh of relief. Looking around, she saw that the witches who could still move were still holding up their shields, while the exhausted witches were lying on the ground, trying to regain their strength as soon as possible. Even though they had just gone through a great battle, their expressions did not reveal the slightest trace of exhaustion or despair. Instead, they grinned and waved at her in a relaxed manner. Obviously, everyone thought the same as her. They treated every battle as the last one in their lives, and they would not regret it even if they had to sacrifice everything for the tequila. This made Pasha feel a little sore in her eyes, and a warm current slowly flowed in her heart like a hot spring. Every witch was equally important. Over the past 400 years, the number of witches had never increased. They had already accumulated a deep affection for each other, so it was good news that none of them were missing. But this body has to be changed. Elena sighed. It took me a long time to choose this body. I don't know if there is a more handsome and strong one in the new body. Pasha didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Don't talk about such a boring topic at this time. She stretched out her tentacle and knocked on their heads. Is there anyone else who needs to be replaced? About 5 or 6, Elena said, counting with her fingers. Betty's stomach was cut open on the way. Izzo was sprayed by the magma to cover Aletheia. Only his head can be seen. The rest of them are like me, missing arms and legs. They've been taken away to preserve their souls. So you're planning to pick a suitable body before moving? Of course. I don't even feel it anymore. At least I should change it to something more comfortable. Elena curled her lips and put the blood-stained giant sword on her back. She staggered and fell to the ground after taking 2 steps. TSK, this damned body. Scourge didn't feel pain or fatigue, but the physical exhaustion was real. Even if he was still full of spirit, the exhausted body would become extremely weak, as if it was out of control. Let me take you there. Pasha rolled Elena up with her tentacle and walked to the side room of the hall. All the gods' punishment warriors who came from Hermes without a master were collected there for the survivors. I remembered that some of the new batch looked pretty good. Oh. You also care about this? Elena looked at her with interest. Pasha coughed involuntarily. Don't forget, I'm also a witch like you." When she finished dealing with the wounded, Alethea and Celine brought good news and bad news. The former was that most of the demonic beasts in the maze had been killed and the flying beasts circling outside had fled. There should not be another large-scale attack in a short time. The latter was that 2 parts of the instrument of divine retribution had been damaged, probably because of the hasty formation of the new core. In short, they would not be protected by the instrument for the next week. The bad news made Pasha a little worried. Even this degree of activation could damage the core. If it were the chosen one, could it only be used once? The more complex the key was, the wider the range of the instrument of divine retribution would be. The instrument she activated could only cover the whole maze, which was a distance of several hundred meters. It was far from enough to fight against the demons. When the magic power was full, she and the instrument would have been destroyed by the spear throwing. Only the chosen one could spread the light wave more than 10 miles away, so that the instrument of divine retribution could become the most powerful weapon against the enemy. Due to the lack of high-quality demon-loving materials, they could only pick and choose in the ruins. They were all fragile bone products, so it was normal that they could not meet the requirements of the core. After all, it was almost a god's creation. If the Quest Society was still here, they could use gold, silver, and gems freely. At least they didn't need to be tested and repaired every time. Anyway, don't test again this winter. I don't want to live such a thrilling life every day. Alethea complained. There is no chance to test again, huh? She suddenly paused. Wait a minute. What's wrong? Pasha asked. Look at the phantom instrument. Celine used the main tentacle attached to the roof to float to a smaller magic core. The luster of the core changed. The 5-colored stone was broken. What? Both of them were shocked, and a bad premonition arose in their hearts at the same time. Phyllis would only break the magic stone in her hand when she had to contact the maze. It had only been more than a month, so it was unlikely that she had found the chosen one. Either she was in trouble and had to ask the maze for help, or the ring had been destroyed by someone else. No matter what the situation was, it was not good news. Can you confirm her location? Alethea asked in a low voice. Celine inserted her tentacle into the core. Southwest of us, away, it should be in the kingdom of Greycastle, near the entrance of the fertile plains. The western region of Greycastle. It seemed that she had arrived at the destination of this trip. Pasha could not help but think, so what was the problem that forced Phyllis to break the magic stone? Did she accidentally expose her identity? Or did the witches of the New Age see her as an enemy? Or, no, it could not be so smooth. Pasha shook her head and threw the distracting thoughts out of her mind. She was most likely in trouble. What are you going to do? Alethea looked at her. She thought for a moment and replied. According to the plan, the phantom instrument would be activated 1 day later. This was the shortest preparation time for the instrument. Chapter 731. The Witch Union welcomes you to join us. Vendi spread the prepared contract on the table and said to the witches in the kingdom of Wolfheart with a smile, read the oath on the back of the contract and sign your name. Then you'll officially become a member of the Union. This process should have been completed long ago if Princess Tilly had not proposed the hunting competition. Regardless of who won or lost, she had been worried about the competition during the few days of preparation. The day of the hunting competition had been like a year, and she had even complained about His Majesty for a long time. Coupled with the artillery exercise that followed, the competition had been postponed. However, to her surprise, Annie, who seemed to be calm, had come to her. Sister Vendi, don't you want to test our abilities first? Amy asked. After staying in Neverwinter for a week and a half, this lively little girl had won the favor of most of the witches. Her naive and trusting personality made her quickly familiar with the others, and now she could call Vendi sister quite easily. The test is usually arranged after the signing of the contract, Vendi said softly. If you have any questions about the terms of the contract, you can ask them now. Oh. Amy was the only one who could understand the words. The other 3 witches gathered around her, listening to the terms and exchanging opinions. Vendi looked at the witches who were whispering to each other with great interest, and could not help but recall the scene when she had signed the contract. At first, she thought that the rules were too inconceivable, and that it was likely that the Lord was deliberately showing his benevolence. It would not be long before he changed the rules completely, or he would implement a set of secret rules to restrict the witches' actions. However, later she found that she was wrong. Until today, 2 years later, the basic framework of the contract had not changed. Based on this point alone, Vendi felt that the choice she had made at that time was the best decision in her life. Wow, we can get a golden dragon every month. Can we buy whatever we want? The part about paid leave can't be true, right? If His Majesty can't provide security and shelter, the witches have the right to terminate the contract. Is this really not a betrayal? Vendi answered their questions with a smile, just like how she answered herself in the past. She could almost guess at which moment Annie and the others would exclaim in surprise, because she had been just as surprised when she read the entire contract. His Majesty had given the witches what they longed for the most, freedom and recognition. The fate of the witch union was closely linked to that of Roland Wimbledon. Vendi believed that even if His Majesty fell into a crisis in the future and could no longer provide him with food and shelter, they would not leave his side. This connection was not written in the contract, but it was stronger than words and language. However, it was foreseeable that there would be fewer and fewer scenes full of fun and memories. The newly awakened witches had a completely different living environment from them. They no longer had to face the threat of the church, nor did they have to face the hostility of the people around them, or even their relatives. Naturally, they would not be like them, grateful for their hard-won new life. After confirming the terms, it was time to read the oath and sign. There were no mandatory rules in the agreement. It only stated that they had no hostility towards Roland and the witch union and that they had joined the union of their own free will. After the 4 witches finished reading, Vendi received a pinch from Nightingale to confirm its authenticity. Now, we're sisters. She smiled and hugged the 4 witches. In this way, there were 4 more members of the witch union. The place to test their abilities was outside the witch building, in Leaf's garden jungle. The first one to be tested was Annie. Vendi had learned a lot about her ability from Amy. Annie could also produce high temperature, but she could not ignite an open flame like Anna. The temperature was only attached to the surface of her palm. In the early stage of awakening, it was almost as hot as a torch. In adulthood, when it solidified, it could make iron red hot and melt lead and bronze. Throughout the test, Annie looked a little gloomy. It was obvious that she did not have much confidence in her ability. Thinking of Annie's experience of being rejected by the Blood Fang Association, Vendi could understand what she was thinking. In the Witch Cooperation Association, she had seen many witches like Annie, such as Mystery Moon and Echo. No matter how useless they seemed, they could always be reborn in Neverwinter. Great ability, Vendi encouraged. The mechanical processing plant in the industrial zone will definitely welcome you. Really? Annie was a little surprised. Even if the temperature can't be separated from the palm? Of course, the furnace area and the chemical laboratory are also. You'll definitely become a busy person in the union. She smiled and wrote down several possible positions in her notebook. No one was more proficient than His Majesty in identifying the use of the ability. With her current knowledge, she was far from qualified for this job. Therefore, Vendi often wrote down her ideas and gave them to His Majesty for review and judgment. In the process, she improved her ability. Her ability was not as good as most of her sisters, and she was not the best in learning. Now that His Majesty had asked her to manage the Witch Union, she did not want to let him down. After Annie retreated doubtfully, the second one to come forward was Amy. Vendi could not bear to test her ability in detail. Fast self-healing seemed attractive, but it was based on the destruction of her body. The only thing to be thankful for was that witches were always in a state of minor injuries, so Amy did not have to worry about the threat of magic power bite. After a brief inquiry, Vendi wrote down the position of the medical center in her notebook. After thinking about it, she found that this was the only place that was slightly related to healing. The third witch hero was also the same. She could transfer the disease, but not the trauma. There was no better place than the medical center. However, when she thought that the so-called disease was caused by tiny insects, she might be able to cooperate with Lily to carry out microscopic research. With this in mind, Vendi drew a circle beside the hero's name. After she received universal education and had a certain understanding of natural science theoretical foundation, there might be new changes in her ability. The last one was Broken Sword. Vendi had more or less heard about the abilities of the three witches, but this silver witch had never shown her ability in front of Yorko and Phyllis. Let's start. She nodded at Broken Sword. Broken Sword took a deep breath and closed her eyes. With the surge of magic power, her whole body burst into a dazzling light, which was almost impossible to look at directly. Vendi could not help but squint and take 2 steps back. In terms of this momentum, Broken Sword was much more powerful than the other witches in the kingdom of Wolfheart. When the light dissipated, she sucked in a breath of cold air, almost unable to believe her eyes. Chapter 732. This is your ability. It took a while for Vendi to react. She can't hear you, Annie said. After turning into a weapon, Broken Sword will lose the ability to communicate with the outside world. Only when you hold her will she be able to perceive the world through your 5 senses. So that's how it is. Wendy hesitated for a moment before she stepped forward and gently grasped the hilt of the sword. In an instant, her mind seemed to have gained an additional consciousness. The blade of the sword fused with her at this moment, as if it had become a part of her body. Not only that, Vendi also felt that her vision and hearing had become much sharper, and her whole body was full of strength. This is symbiosis. Broken Sword's voice rang in his mind. When you pick me up, everything I have will be attached to you. Speaking of this, her voice seemed to reveal a trace of regret. Unfortunately, my body is not very good since childhood, and my strength is limited. Even if I am with you, I can't help much. So the reason why I feel full of strength is because I inherited Broken Sword's ability. Vendi raised the weapon and carefully looked at it. The hilt felt warm and soft, like a living thing. The shape of the blade was a bit strange. It was only about an arm's length, but it was thin like a finger, flat at the front and round at the back. Rather than saying it was like a sword, it was more like a magnified needle. If one looked closely, they could also see the fine stripes on the blade, as if it was tied up by countless silver filaments. Vendi could not help but think of Broken Sword's striking silver hair. How long can you maintain this form? If you don't change repeatedly, it can last forever. It seems like it's the same as Maggie, she thought. Only the moment of change will consume a lot of magic power. Maggie? Do you mean that huge pigeon? Vendi was stunned for a moment before she realized that as long as she was close to Broken Sword, she could see her thoughts. This made her a little flustered. After all, there were some things that she did not want anyone to know. Your mood is a little unstable. What is this, a cloth belt? Nothing. Wendy hurriedly stuck the blade back into the ground and looked at Annie. Ahem, can anyone become one with the Broken Sword? In theory, as long as she is willing to accept it, ordinary people can also get her power. Annie nodded. But in that state, she is just an extraordinarily hard weapon. Only in the hands of witches can she exert her true strength. In the hands of witches? Yes. Annie seemed to have noticed something and said calmly, in addition, telepathy doesn't mean spying on your mind. As long as you don't focus on your current thoughts, Broken Sword won't be able to detect your mood. I see. Vendi calmed down and grasped the hilt again. Did I say something wrong just now? I'm sorry. I won't casually ask such a question again. Broken Sword's eager voice immediately appeared in her mind. No, nothing. She suddenly thought of a question. If I suddenly put you down, what would you see? They would become pitch black, without any sound or touch, as if they were floating in the void. Sure enough, the experience of losing all senses in an instant will not be good. Thinking of this, Vendi said as slowly as possible, I should be the one to apologize. Don't worry, I won't casually leave you behind again. Dagger looked a little surprised and replied softly after a while. Yes. By the way, Annie said that only witches can exert your true strength? That's right. If I fight in the form of a weapon, I will also get hurt if I bump too much. However, witches can increase the sharpness and attack range of the blade by injecting magic power. Even without touching the enemy, they can still stab him. Wendy followed his instructions and injected magic into the broken sword. The silver sword was suddenly covered with a layer of hazy white light, like a constantly flowing mist. At the same time, she felt the level of magic power in her body was rapidly declining. Obviously, this state could not be maintained for long. Under the urging of broken sword, Vendi aimed at an olive tree branch and quickly waved the long sword. She saw a sharp air flow from the tip of the sword and instantly cut the branch in half. This is wind? She asked in surprise. The magic power injected will reflect the power of the sword holder to a certain extent. It turns out that you are a combat witch. Broken Sword was a little surprised. If it's Annie, she can't let her power leave the blade. So that's how it is. Vendi could not help thinking of Anna's Blackfire. If she attacked with all her magic power, what would the scene be like? It would probably be no less powerful than the Sigil of Gods will that could trigger the Sky Thunder. However, Anna was one of the most important witches in the Alliance and His Majesty's beloved. It was basically impossible for her to go to the battlefield in person. As for the other combat witches, she thought for a long time but could not find a suitable candidate, so she simply circled Broken Sword's name. It was better to let His Majesty decide who should cooperate with Broken Sword's ability. When the loud and melodious whistle came from the direction of the dock, Roland put down the quill in his hand and could not help but stretch. One long and two short, the whole dock resonated. This was the signal for the army to set off. After completing the battle preparations, the expedition team of the First Army spent only one morning boarding the ships. The first batch of cement ships carrying soldiers would officially leave Neverwinter for Fallen Dragon Ridge with the sound of the steam whistle. After that, many ships would take on the task of transporting ammunition and provisions. Until the new and old soldiers finished gathering at Fallen Dragon Ridge, the battle to recover the southernmost region would officially begin. However, he had finally taken this step. Roland glanced at the densely packed sketches on the table. They were the design drawings of the internal combustion engine. As the second-generation prime power machine that completely replaced the steam engine, it was self-evident that the internal combustion engine was of great importance to the industry and even changed the course of world history to a certain extent. From the first piston engine and gas turbine to the later jet engine, the internal combustion engine almost carried half of the sky of industrial power. It was not until the appearance of the electric motor that the insufferably arrogant dominant position was shaken. There was no doubt that as one of the most important machinery in history, the internal combustion engine would blossom in a new era in Neverwinter. The Blackwater in the southernmost region was an extremely important part of this plan. If he could extract fuel from it, the following development would naturally be a matter of course. If not, he could only consider using alcohol as fuel. Even if it was technically feasible, the scale would definitely be greatly limited. At this moment, Agatha suddenly knocked on the door and walked into the room. Chapter 733. In the center of the Hall of the Ruins, the phantom instrument was fully opened and filled with magic power. Its core was emitting a cold purple light. Next, as long as Pasha gave an order, it could project the light curtain thousands of miles away, which was beyond the witch's ability. It was a power given by God. Pasha looked behind her. All the sarcomas had fallen to the ground. The gods' punishment witches stood side by side with the most serious expressions. The dead demonic hybrids were deliberately piled up on both sides. The pale blue blood reflected the purple light, looking gloomy and horrible. If it were a group of common people, they would definitely be shocked by this hellish scene, right? Pasha did not want this to happen. After the demonic beasts' corpses decomposed, they would leave behind sticky remains, which were not only difficult to remove but also emitted a disgusting stench. The gods' punishment witches could not smell it, but Pasha could feel it with her tentacles. After 400 years, this hall was no different from their home. Who would want to make a mess of their own hall? But she had to be prepared for the worst. That was, Phyllis was in danger and the ring was not broken by her. If that really happened, it was necessary to create the most terrifying atmosphere to frighten and deter those who did harm to her. The western region of Grey Castle was close to the entrance of the fertile plains and was undoubtedly attacked by demonic beasts every year. Whether it was witches or common people who attacked Phyllis, they should be able to tell from the mountain of demonic hybrids' corpses that they were definitely not to be trifled with. Only by making them aware of the power of the tequila survivors could they buy time for the rescue. Activate the instrument, Celine said. No matter what, we have to find out Phyllis's situation first. Pasha nodded her main tentacle and gave an order to the instrument. In an instant, everyone felt the light around them dim a little. A huge purple light curtain covered the whole hall. On the other side of the phantom instrument, the scene when the five-colored stone was broken appeared. Pasha could not help but be surprised. It was not a gloomy dungeon, nor was it a desolate wilderness, but a bright hall. The hall was bright and clean. A long wooden table covered with a white cloth was placed in the middle of the hall. There were fresh flowers and teacups on the table. There were no signs of a fight. It was as if this place was deliberately chosen to destroy the magic stone. Phyllis was standing by the window, chatting with another witch. When she saw the light screen appear, she turned around with a surprised look on her face. What's wrong with you guys? Was the hall attacked by demonic beasts? Pasha was speechless. She suddenly felt that Phyllis's situation was different from what she had imagined. Phyllis did not seem to be attacked or tortured, nor did she seem to be in danger. Instead, she looked even more energetic than before. After taking a closer look, he found that Phyllis was no longer wearing the vulgar and cheap-made clothes, but an exquisite woolen robe. Set off by the gorgeous clothes, it was natural that her complexion was better than before. The other witches were not much better. They looked at each other for a long time, but no one said anything. Fortunately, they could not see their expressions after turning into blobs, or the atmosphere would be very awkward. The demonic beasts did launch a large-scale attack recently, but don't worry, the magic core and the relics of the gods are safe and sound, and everyone is safe. As a person who was used to great storms, Pasha was the first to recover. There are too many corpses, and we haven't had time to clean them up. Is that so? Phyllis showed a doubtful look. Of course, ahem. Pasha waved her tentacles at the gods' punishment witches behind her. Okay, everyone, continue to clean up the corpses and try to throw them out of the maze before the rotten liquid sticks to the floor. The witches who stood side by side with solemn expressions quickly became gloomy. There are so many corpses, how long will it take to move all of them? It took a whole day just to pile them up. I don't want to touch these sticky things at all. Yes, even if you don't feel it, it looks disgusting. Stop complaining. Do you want to lie in the corpses and sleep? Throw them all into the magma. At most, they will be smothered by the smoke. Smothered? Do you want the whole ruins to become a chimney? Pfft. The blue-haired witch beside Phyllis could not help but chuckle. I guess they must be worried that something bad has happened to you, so they put on a posture to scare the negotiation partner. Somehow, Pasha felt that the voice was very familiar. She looked at the witch carefully, and suddenly a name flashed in her mind. You are Agatha? What? Celine asked in surprise. The youngest senior witch in history. That's impossible. Didn't she die with tequila? Even if she escaped from the holy city, it has been more than 400 years. How could she still be the same? Many people's minds were ringing. Not only the promoted living in the sarcoma, but also the gods' punishment witches also gathered around. She is indeed the senior genius, Phyllis confirmed. When Agatha was besieged by demons in the research tower in the misty forest, she completely froze herself with a multi-layered ice coffin and killed all the enemies who were chasing her. It was not until the Witch Union found the ruins of the stone tower that they rescued her. I see. Hearing this, Pasha could not help but feel excited. An exciting idea came from the bottom of her heart. Phyllis was not in trouble, and she quickly revealed her identity to the witches in Grey Castle. She also met a promoted tequila. The purpose of contacting the labyrinth was obvious. Could it be that this senior witch was the chosen one they were looking for? When she asked this question, Phyllis showed a look of embarrassment and hesitation. She first glanced at Agatha, and then said in a low voice, "Can you let me talk to them alone? It won't take too much time." Agatha nodded. "When you are done, I will inform His Majesty." Then she turned and left the hall. Then Phyllis took a deep breath and looked at Pasha again. "I did find the chosen one indicated by the magic stone, but he is a little different from the candidate in our plan." "Wait, him?" Pasha was stunned. Before she had time to ask further, she heard an almost bizarre experience from Phyllis. The close cooperation between the witches and the mortals. The powerful army that defeated the church. The powerful gunpowder weapons with infinite power. Chapter 734. When Phyllis told them the news, the hall burst into an uproar. How can a mortal contact God? Alethia's voice was full of shock and disbelief. You must be wrong. Are you sure the beam of light came from him? Have you checked all the witches in the western region of Grey Castle? Celine pointed to the crux of the problem. Obviously, these two questions were also on the minds of most people. I've confirmed it with my own eyes, and his key is much more complicated than what Pasha asked for. The five-colored stone can no longer contain the Gable orange light, Phyllis said slowly. I also found it hard to believe at first, but it's true. Then does he have magic power? Pasha asked with a last glimmer of hope. Unfortunately, he can't activate the instrument of divine retribution. Phyllis's answer made everyone look gloomy. It was unexpected that the chosen one with a complicated key could be found so quickly, but it was too unexpected. No one could have expected that the magic power could be separated from the key, which completely subverted their previous ideas. Without magic power, it was impossible to connect to the core, even with the help of witches. The physique of a mortal could not bear the damage caused by this extraordinary power. Even if a very strong person could hold on for a quarter or two, they could not master the key points of using magic power, which had been fully proved in the tequila era. What worried Pasha even more was that she had thought that senior witches had a high chance of becoming the chosen one. In the era when the Union ruled the fertile plains, she could easily find a dozen candidates who met the requirements. But the news brought back by Phyllis completely changed her idea. There were more than 10 senior ascendants in the small city of Neverwinter. Such an amazing number meant that the Witch Union was no weaker than some of the core organizations of the Union, such as the Quest Society and the Blessed Army, which only had so many senior ascendants. But even so, Phyllis did not find the other chosen one. Destroying the demons was originally within reach, but they missed the opportunity because the ruins were discovered too late, and they were never even close to the target, and the chosen one's plan was wishful thinking from the beginning to the end. These two feelings were completely different. If so many senior witches could not meet the requirements of the chosen one, was it really right for them to follow Lady Natalia and resolutely resist the Queen of Starfall City's God's Punishment Army plan? Just thinking about it made Pasha shudder. She shook her head and suppressed her thoughts. She then asked, You just said that the mortal king wants to cooperate with us? He wants to know us, and he's willing to join hands to fight against the demons, said Phyllis, but we'll have to talk about the details later. Do you think he has the ability to fight against demons? I'm not sure. The weapon he showed us is indeed powerful, but I know too little about it. Phyllis hesitated for a moment. But Agatha is confident about it. She thinks that as long as Neverwinter is given another 2 or 3 years, it's not impossible to keep the demons west of the impassable mountain range. What does she think of our relationship with Neverwinter? Alethea asked in a low voice. Agatha thinks she's a tequila witch, but she'll work for Roland Wimbledon, that is, the mortal king. Phyllis paused and told the new union's thoughts. She thinks that the most urgent task at present is to defeat the demons, and all the forces on the continent should unite and fight for the third battle of divine will. Work for the mortals. Is she crazy? Alethea shouted. Did she forget how we lost to the demons in the first battle of divine will? The crowd also started to talk noisily. Almost all the members of the union had to learn about that period of history. There might be outstanding extraordinary witches among the mortals, but as a whole, it was really embarrassing to talk about their performance. For example, they opened the city gate and surrendered to the demons, only to be killed. Another example was the witch army that traveled thousands of miles to help, only to be rejected by the Lord. They could only watch helplessly as the reinforcements were killed by the demons. There were also countless cases of cowardice and desertion. Sometimes, a huge army of 20,000 to 30,000 people was not even as powerful as an elite team of 100 witches. In some places, there were even cases of mortals using God's stones of retaliation to deal with witches, which exacerbated the rupture of cooperation between the two sides. If not for this, human beings would not have retreated all the way from the vast land of Dawn to the fertile plains. With such a poor performance, coupled with the shortage of food and resources, it was only natural that the witches completely replaced the regime of the mortals. Looking at Alethea, who was waving her tentacles to show her dissatisfaction, Pasha was also worried. According to Phyllis, King Roland Wimbledon of Greycastle might be an outstanding extraordinary, but it was difficult for a single person to change the whole group of mortals. If the other kingdoms made stupid and low-level mistakes, which side would he take? If the war continued for 20 or 30 years, would he still be as determined and energetic as he was when he was young? Not everyone was willing to possess an empty body and lose all senses in order to prolong their lives. Even if he agreed, what about his descendants after 40 or 50 years? Would they be willing to be the heir for life? These were all questions that Pasha needed to consider. Generally speaking, as long as the demons could be defeated, any price was acceptable. Whether it was Alice or Natalia, they all believed in one thing: as long as the human race existed, the witches would never cease. One day, they would return to the top. This was the essential difference between God's favored and mortals. She was worried that they would pay the price, but still fail. After all, they would not have another chance to try again. Let's talk to Roland first. Agatha used her main tentacles to press down the indignant Alethea. When I was in the Quest Society, I had dealings with Agatha. Although she sympathizes with mortals, she won't act on impulse. Besides, we originally planned to communicate with the secular kingdoms. Now we have a king who doesn't discriminate against witches and is ready for the battle of divine will. Isn't it an ideal start for us? I agree. It's impossible for us to stop the demons with only a few of us. With the help of mortals' propaganda, we can also expand our influence in the witch organization. And he's also helping to recruit witches. In this way, Phyllis will have a greater chance to find the second chosen one. I'm curious about those gunpowder weapons. If we have them, will we be able to kill the demons as easily as we kill demonic beasts? The gods' punishment witches all talked at once. Celine is right. Pasha sighed. Whether they accepted the new union or not, they had to reconnect with the mortals. An enlightened king like Roland was already the most suitable person to negotiate with. As for the future, they could only decide after the negotiation. Maybe Roland also had the same idea. Chapter 735. When Roland walked into the parlor, he was immediately attracted by the light curtain that covered half of the wall. The edge of the light curtain emitted a flickering purple light, as if there was a passage connecting different planes on the wall. The scene on the other side was very gloomy, like a huge hole in the depths of the earth. The thin red river flowed like a spider's web, illuminating the rock walls and the dome. The outline of the ancient ruins was vaguely visible. Judging from the realistic visual effect, this should not be a fabricated scene, but a real-time live broadcast from thousands of miles away. A huge blob monster was facing him, its tentacles all spread out, and a strange voice sounded directly in his mind. "Sorry to keep you waiting. Your Majesty Roland Wimbledon, King of Greycastle. I'm Pasha, one of the survivors of Tequila. You must have heard about us from Phyllis." "So this is what direct communication is all about," Roland said as he sat down on the other side of the light curtain. Nightingale, Agatha, Wendy, and Scroll were also present with him. "It's good that you guys talk for a while, so I don't have to introduce myself." "You don't look surprised at all." Pasha seemed a little surprised. "I thought it would take a long time for you to accept that we are witches. Because I've seen too many things like possession and prosthetics," Roland thought to himself, but he still said calmly, "The bloody moon is coming, and time is running out for both of us. Instead of hiding and suspecting each other, it's better to be honest with each other from the beginning. Since you used to be the rulers of the continent, you should understand this." Pasha was stunned for a moment, and then she chuckled. "Phyllis is right. You are indeed a rare extraordinary person. I'm just standing on the shoulders of my predecessors." Roland spread out his hands and said, "Let's get down to business. We all have the same goal, which is to fight against the demons. Apart from searching for the Chosen One, you also sent Phyllis to communicate with the secular kingdoms. Am I right?" "Exactly," Pasha admitted generously. "At first, we just wanted to infiltrate secretly and slowly recruit or control some mortals to search for the Chosen One. The black money of the Kingdom of Dawn was one of them. However, the failure of the church allowed us to see another kind of hope. That was to stand in front of the stage openly and gather all the witches in one place. That's why you're interested in Greycastle. According to the information collected, Sleeping Island in the fjords has the largest witch organization at present, and its leader is the sister of the King of Greycastle. Greycastle is a big country that personally defeated the church, so it is a very suitable choice as the first stop to find the Chosen One. However, I didn't expect that Phyllis would contact you so quickly and bring me a piece of shocking news. To be honest, we thought it would take at least 2 or 3 years to get to this point." "Very good, it seems that we've saved another 2 or 3 years. This achievement alone is enough to make this conference go down in history." Roland smiled. "It seems that you're right." Pasha also smiled. "Provided that we can defeat the demons and continue to survive in the Land of Dawn. Of course, as long as ordinary people and witches put down their barriers and work hand in hand, the demons are not unbeatable." Roland paused. "I can also help you find the Chosen One. After all, it's always good to have another powerful weapon against the demons. However, cooperation must be based on mutual understanding. What do you think?" "I agree." Pasha's tentacles swayed in unison. "If you want to know anything, please ask, Your Majesty." He looked around and exchanged glances with Agatha, Wendy, and Scroll. Then he slowly said, "After learning the buried history from Phyllis, my biggest question is, what on earth did you find in the ruins that made Tequila break with Starfall City and even led to the collapse of the Union?" This was also one of the key reasons why Roland decided to take the initiative to contact the survivors. For example, the technology of soul transfer was something that current technology could not solve. The instrument of divine retribution, which could replace the plan of the gods' punishment army and completely destroy the demons, must also be extraordinary. Roland would not blindly believe that the technology he knew was perfect. Every modern person knew the principle of learning from others' strong points to make up for their shortcomings. In fact, he had always wanted to incorporate magic power, which seemed to be omnipotent, into science and technology. When he saw that the ancient artifacts in the ruins could accurately project real-time images to the castle in the western region, he was sure that this conference was absolutely necessary. There was no doubt that this ability was beyond the limits of witches. "Pasha, are you sure you want to tell him this? That's the secret of the gods. How much sacrifice did we make to?" In an instant, several voices poured into his mind. Some were worried, and some were dissatisfied. Only then did he realize that many people in Tequila were also watching this conference. It's because of the sacrifices we've made that we can't let them go to waste. Pasha interrupted the discussion. If we can't resist the demonic tide, do we have to take this secret to the grave, just like the tombstones we found? Her loud rhetorical question instantly silenced the room. Probably because she had hit the nail on the head, no one stood up to oppose her opinion. This made Roland a little concerned. It seemed that Phyllis's description of the survivors was not a lie. They did eliminate the influence of class and status to a certain extent. Otherwise, they would not have quarreled on such a big matter. But in general, Pasha still had a very high prestige among them. I'm sorry, this information is indeed very important. Pasha lowered her tentacles toward the living room as if to express her apology. But now, it can no longer be a secret, at least not between us. After a moment of silence, she continued, to be precise, we didn't find the ruins, but the ruins found us. Roland frowned. It found the tequila. Not the tequila, but us in an earlier era. Around the beginning of the first battle of divine will. Did the us Pasha mentioned refer to all human beings? For some reason, he faintly felt a chill rising from the soles of his feet. That happened more than 800 years ago. Chapter 736. Underground, Civilization. Roland couldn't help but think of the forks in the North Slope mine, as well as the caves that Nightingale said ran through the impassable mountain range. In his memory, there was no geological movement that could create such a strange landscape. At first, he thought that it was caused by some mutated hybrid demonic beasts, but now it seemed that they were traces left behind by the underground civilization. At that time, people did not realize this at all, nor did they intend to communicate with each other. The forms of the two were so different that we even regarded each other as a new kind of demon. Therefore, there was a great discrepancy in the recorded history. It was not until the end of the Second Battle of Divine Will that a breakthrough was made. At that time, only Tequila was left out of the three holy cities, and the Union was at a critical moment of life and death. What do you mean by a breakthrough? The Quest Society figured out a way to store souls from the slate drawings they left behind, and verified this possibility on an unhatched primordial carrier. From then on, the three chiefs began to study the transformation of the God's Punishment Army. I don't know anything about this, Agatha said in surprise. Soul transfer was the Union's top secret. It was even 2 levels higher than the God's Punishment Army project, which used witches as experimental materials. At that time, only the 3 chiefs and a few high-level officials knew about it. Pasha replied, we only learned of this shocking news after the fall of Tequila. So Natalia supported the plan of the God's Punishment Army from the very beginning? Roland frowned and asked, and what's the original carrier? Because she had no choice. As for the latter, it's what we are now. Her tentacles drooped down, and her body moved closer to the light screen. This ugly and weird body is the evidence of the underground civilization's existence, and the only tombstone they left behind. It's a long story, Your Majesty. Please listen to me slowly. Roland nodded and poured himself a cup of chaos drink. He leaned back on the chair and sensed the consciousness of the other party. According to the clues on the stone slab, the vanished civilization left behind a city in the impassable mountain range. The Quest Society searched for a long time but to no avail. Later, they suddenly realized that since the other party was used to moving underground, could they have built their city underground as well? After expanding the search area downwards, the witches finally found this magnificent city. It has a total of 4 layers, nearly half the size of Tequila. Each layer has countless forks and holes, making it as complex as a maze. If he didn't have a witch who could sense the location as a guide, once he fell into it, it would be difficult to get out. Therefore, the Quest Society also called it the Maze Ruins. Unfortunately, Tequila fell into the hands of the demons before they could explore it in detail. Everyone had no choice but to flee. After paying a heavy price, we finally arrived at the labyrinth. According to the plan, the Union would take away the original carriers stored in the labyrinth and then go to the Hermes Plateau to build a new holy city. They would then recast a new order in the barbarian land on the east coast of the continent. But no one can predict what will happen next. At this point, Pasha fell silent, and the scales on her body became dim. Even though he couldn't see her expression, Roland could feel the sadness in her heart. After a while, she continued, during the rest, the Quest Society found that the labyrinth ruins were well preserved, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was a brand new city. In addition to the original carriers, the bottom layer of the ruins also hid many incredible secrets, among which the three most important discoveries were the magic core, the central carrier, and the records of the lost civilization. Later, we realized that as early as the first battle of divine will, it had wanted to lead us here. Pasha took a deep breath. The labyrinth ruins were prepared for us. Why? Tilly couldn't help asking. For revenge. Another voice sounded in everyone's mind. Compared to Pasha, this voice was much colder. It hoped that we could destroy the demons to avenge the extinction of their race. This is only Lady Natalia's speculation. There was no mention of this in the documents. Pasha waved her tentacles as if she was shaking her head. Perhaps they simply wanted to pass on their civilization. In short, the Quest Society found a lot of research information about divine will and magic power from the records left behind. In order to let us know the details, most of the conclusions were expressed in the form of lithographs. The description of the magic core was the source of the disagreement between the Queen of Sunchisar and the Queen of Starfall. The most important content in the lithographs was, magic power has infinite possibilities, and the process of pursuing divine will is the ladder of mastering magic power. Roland knew that this was the key point. What's the magic core? Is it related to the instrument of divine retribution? You can think of the magic core as an artificial magic cyclone. It's not limited by the witches themselves, and it can change its shape at any time. This incredible device completely subverts the Union's understanding. Pasha pointed at the light screen with one of her tentacles. For example, the phantom instrument we are using now is a small magic core. When necessary, it can also be transformed into other instruments. As for the instrument of divine retribution, it's the largest magic core in the ruins. I see. He immediately realized the advantages of this device. Compared with the witch's inborn ability, the magic core could be called a universal terminal. Most importantly, its effective range was far beyond the limit of 5 meters. Whether it was used for production or combat, it was much more powerful than the witches. But this is only the most basic use of magic power, just like the original awakening and the senior advancement. The Slate prophecy says that if we continue to deepen our understanding of magic power, one day, we will be no different from God. Pasha said dejectedly, as if she was not talking about a magnificent thing, but a lost person who had lost his goal. Roland heard the key point of this sentence. But you don't have time. You're right. We don't know whether it will take 100 years or 1,000 years. In order to get in touch with the magic core, several members of the Quest Society were sacrificed. Obviously, the witches could not directly touch these strange instruments. We wanted to solve the problem, but we couldn't find a way, so the exploration was in a deadlock. The things that the drawings could record were extremely limited. If one wanted to continue studying them, he could only follow their instructions and fuse with the central carrier. When enough people fused with them, it was possible to understand their words and further read the more profound documents and records. But we don't have time. It took us more than 3 years to figure out these things. Many common people began to try to get rid of our control. We didn't know how many witches we needed to integrate with the carrier. At that time, we only had enough resources to focus on one research. If this continues, the Union's grand plan to restore order will lose its foundation. Chapter 737. Roland already knew what happened next. When the gods' punishment army was no longer the only way to fight against the demons, some people held the belief that they did not want to reduce their own kind to material for shells, and this caused a serious conflict with Alice. Now, it seemed that the battle of faith recorded in the history books of the church was probably another name for this battle of faith, using a fictitious victory to cover up the truth. The root cause of this conflict, apart from the difference in ideology, was that the higher-ups of the Union knew very well that no matter which plan they chose, they could not guarantee that they would be able to defeat the demons. According to Phyllis, the Queen of Starfall City's God's Punishment Army plan could indeed allow the Union to have about 3,000 to 4,000 powerful ordinary warriors before the Battle of Divine Will. However, the disadvantage was that once these thousands of people were lost, they could not be effectively replaced in a short period of time. It was a long process for the soul to adapt to the body. A group of warriors who could not bear the exhaustion might be able to resist the demon's attack for decades, or even recapture the ruins of the holy city of Tequila, but it would be unrealistic to break through the land of dawn. Needless to say, the Chosen One's plan was completely based on luck. It was normal to fail, but if it succeeded, not only would there be no side effects, but according to the record on the slate, it would also bring the witches closer to God. Comparing the two, one was betting on the present, while the other was betting on the future. In the end, you defeated the Starfall City. A rupture will not produce a real winner, and Tequila was not the final winner. After both sides lost their beyond mortals, Lady Eleanor stood up. To prevent this internal conflict, she threw herself into the central carrier and became the first witch to be integrated. You mean, the three chiefs are in the ruins of the labyrinth? Agatha said in surprise. Yes, the Union lost 3 beyond mortals, which means that the three chiefs system has completely collapsed, Pasha said sadly. Pasha said sadly, in this way, the ruins became a part of the survivors that they couldn't let go of. Both sides had to take a step back and reach an agreement on the negotiation table. Tequila would stay to continue researching the magic core, while Starfall City would go to Hermes to build the new holy city. As the original carriers are extremely limited, to ensure that we have enough manpower, they will provide a certain number of ownerless bodies to the ruins of the labyrinth for a period of 100 years. After the deadline is reached, if there is no breakthrough discovery, or if there are still no clues to the Chosen One, they will take back all the research results from the ruins, including the soul storage device and the original carrier. At that time, Starfall City will come with the God's Punishment Army. If we violate the agreement, they will not show any mercy. Wait a minute. Roland sensed that something was not right. After that, the church never came looking for you. Judging from the result, the Tequila witches were still hiding underground and did not gain the dominant position. The God's Punishment Army used by the church was still the incomplete version without consciousness. Obviously, they had an overwhelming advantage in numbers, but they did not send troops to occupy the ruins of the labyrinth. Did they forget this agreement? For a long time, we didn't have the ability to explore the outside world. The original carriers couldn't be exposed to the sun, and the witches who transferred their souls needed to adapt to their bodies again. Therefore, we didn't know what happened to Hermes at that time. Later, we realized that the new order they built no longer followed the will of Lady Alice. I knew it. Agatha gritted her teeth and said, I knew it was impossible for Lady Alice to do this. Compared with the God's Punishment Army, what the church did was completely destroying the foundation of the witches. The survivors on the other side all agreed with this statement. After everyone calmed down a little, Roland changed the topic and asked, what is the central carrier? What's the difference between it and the original carrier? They are all bodies. The original bodies of the vanished civilization are very fragile, so they have to live in the bodies. These bodies have the ability to live forever. As for where they come from, the documents did not explain in detail. This time, the person who replied seemed to be different. Compared to Pasha and the enraged one, her tone was very intellectual and gentle. In our current knowledge, the primordial carrier is the most common type of body. As for the central carrier, other than its similar appearance, it also stored many unconscious memories. It could be seen as a primordial carrier that had been used for years but had lost its consciousness. Only by fusing these memories together could the remaining documents and experiment records be deciphered. You are. Just by listening to this voice, Roland could imagine an academic woman wearing round black-rimmed glasses and waist-thick braids. "My name is Celine, Your Majesty, one of the members of the Quest Society. I used to work with Agatha." "I don't know her very well," Agatha leaned over and said in a low voice. "Even if we work in the same research tower, we don't necessarily work on the same floor. But I heard that she is usually very quiet, but once she talks about things related to magic, she will change into a different person and become fanatical and unruly. Probably because of this kind of person, she became a loyal follower of Natalia." Roland coughed twice and asked, "So the witches who were fused are still alive?" "Not really," Celine replied. "In addition to Lady Eleanor and more than 10 witches who were seriously injured in the conflict, we had to integrate another 36 volunteers before we could awaken the central carrier. Not everyone is willing to become a monster or spend the rest of their lives in a cage where they can't feel anything. Unfortunately, it can't talk to us normally. It can only answer yes or no." "Yes or no?" Roland's heart slightly moved. "Can I ask any question? It must be something it can understand. The clearer the condition, the faster it can answer. Without the central carrier, it is impossible to repair or change the magic core." Celine's voice gradually became excited. "It's a combination of Tequila's will. The more people it fuses with, the faster it will react. Therefore, for us, accompanying Lady Eleanor is the last contribution we can make to the pursuit of magic power." Roland's thoughts were completely different. Wasn't it the most primitive biological computer system to input questions and get feedback? If the conditions were set, could it solve equations? Could it complete complex calculations independently? If only I could abduct it to Neverwinter and study it. It was just that the current atmosphere was not suitable for such a request. He could only temporarily suppress the thoughts in his heart and plan to slowly come up with a plan when the conditions were discussed later. Chapter 738. Pasha was startled and then said in a surprised tone, "It seems that Phyllis is right. You really know a lot about us. As for the divine will, we only learned about it after the fall of Tequila. I don't think Agatha told you about this. Don't forget, the church was defeated by my hands." Roland crossed his arms to cover his chin and pretended to be profound. "Those witches who were in charge of the holy city of Hermes are now imprisoned in Neverwinter." "I see." Pasha was silent for a long time, as if she was quietly sizing him up. Even though he couldn't see her eyes, Roland could feel the tangible scrutiny. After a long time, her consciousness reappeared in her mind. "It's not impossible for you to know what the divine will is, but please keep it a secret and don't tell anyone else." It was the same for everyone present. When one wanted to pursue or protect something that couldn't be seen or touched, they wouldn't fall into despair so easily. But when it became tangible, the psychological pressure would be greatly increased. If it was leaked, it would be disadvantageous for the third battle of divine will. Roland exchanged glances with the other witches and asked in a deep voice, "So the will of God is a tangible object?" "That's right. It's like a transparent God's stone of retaliation. It's shaped like a sharp spindle, but it doesn't obstruct magic, nor does it have any special function." Pasha spoke slowly, as if she was recalling and narrating at the same time. "But as long as you open your heart near it, you can indeed feel the call of the gods and see some incredible sights." "What kind of scene?" "An infinitely wide hall, a crimson moon hanging high above, and 4 incomparably huge paintings. However, the scenes in the paintings are vivid and constantly changing. The ancient witch described the illusion created by the divine will in detail." "What do those scenes represent?" Tilly could not help but ask. Following her question, everyone held their breath. This question has been bothering people for nearly 1,000 years. The Quest Society has been searching for an answer but to no avail. It was not until the documents in the ruins of the labyrinth were deciphered that we were able to confirm this. All the tentacles on Pasha's body were raised. "What God showed us is the humans, the demons, the unknown enemies, and the underground civilization. The shape of the divine will also confirms this. It is not a complete vertebral body, but a quarter of it, so we call it the relic of God. For giant paintings, a quarter of the relics. Roland frowned. Do you mean that every civilization shown in the giant paintings has one such relic? Not every one of them. The underground civilization has lost its divine will. Pasha's answer sent chills down everyone's spine. One of the giant paintings fell into eternal darkness not long after the end of the first battle of divine will. Based on the descriptions in the documents and the records passed down by the Union, we have come to the conclusion that it has been removed from the battle of divine will forever. Did this not mean that the war that had lasted for hundreds of years was for the relics in the hands of the enemy, and losing one's own relic was equivalent to losing everything? Roland's frown deepened. This was not good news at all. Compared to the unknown enemies, he was more concerned about who had arranged all this. Was it a coincidence or a necessity? Was it a random choice or a predestined fate? What was the purpose of leaving the relics? Was it related to the bloody moon that came periodically? And most importantly, was the understanding of the survivors correct? A series of questions emerged in his mind, and at the same time, he felt that he had vaguely grasped something. What if the word, God, was replaced by another title? While he was deep in thought, Tilly asked, what will happen if we collect all 4 relics? Has God never given us any hints? No one knows the answer, and God has never responded to our call, Pasha said calmly. God does not love mortals. He only favors the victors. How could this be? Just because of a stone of unknown use, they fought each other for hundreds of years. Vendi showed an expression of disbelief. The will of God is too ruthless. Perhaps, there is a passage in the document that is very difficult to understand, but it may be able to explain your doubts, the ancient witch comforted. We are all children of God, but only a few of us can usher in the dawn. From the moment we perceive magic power, we are destined to have an extraordinary life. This competition has been going on for a long time, and to be able to reach this point is already 1 in a million. Birds are not birds, and we are not ourselves. It is fighting that makes all things continue, and it is competition that makes life eternal. It was as if a bolt of lightning flashed through Roland's mind. What did you say before? He almost rudely interrupted. We are all children of God. No, 1 sentence after that. This competition has been going on for a long time, and to be able to reach this point is already 1 in a million, Scroll answered him. I have written it all down, Your Majesty. What did this statement sound like? It was like a long road of evolution. From ignorance to civilization, all species that could survive had eliminated countless competitors. The description of the underground civilization coincided with this process. Thinking carefully, these 4 civilizations seemed to be different, but they all had one very obvious thing in common, and that was, they could all use magic power. Humans could produce witches who could condense magic power, demons, and the eliminated were even more accomplished. If there was no accident, the other unknown opponent should also have the ability to manipulate magic power. Only then did it fit with the original description, we are all the children of God, should be referring to all species with this extraordinary gift. According to this speculation, the battle of divine will might not be to protect or fight for the legacy of God, but to increase the means of evolution, or in other words, it was the rule of the magic world. Therefore, the underground civilization felt that the road to approaching God was to climb the magic ladder. Your Majesty, are you okay? Pasha's voice echoed in Roland's mind. I feel that your thoughts are a little confused. Oh. Can you see what I'm thinking? I can only accurately feel it when you want to talk to me with your mind, just like what I'm doing to you now. She paused. Do you want to try? That way, the communication will be much faster. No, thanks. Roland shook his head with a smile. I'm more used to using my throat and tongue to express myself. As for the confusion, I just thought of something interesting, and it won't affect our discussion. Don't worry. Anyway, there was no reason to talk about rules, and it was understandable to regard them as the work of God, for example, the origin of life on Earth and the later Cambrian explosion. The former was born between lightning and boiling water. Organic molecules constantly collided, fused, and cracked, and finally formed a molecular chain with the ability to self-reproduce. Such a probability was close to impossible. It was as incredible as a gust of wind rolling up a large pile of metal parts and falling down to form a Mercedes-Benz sports car. The latter was even more of a mystery in biology. In the ocean where life was extremely monotonous and basically only algae and soft worms existed, the peace that lasted for hundreds of millions of years seemed to have been broken overnight. In a very short period of time, all kinds of animals suddenly emerged. There were so many of them that they almost covered all the categories of the animal kingdom later on. No matter how life evolved, it could not jump out of this framework. Chapter 739. Of course, this was just a conjecture. He could not get a clear answer from the records of the underground civilization alone. For example, if they believed that they had reached where they were today through competition, how could those eliminated opponents with magic power have left traces of their existence? Did the witches appear before the first battle of divine will, or did the witches have the talent to sense magic power since the primates, or even the lactation era? Or did they simply skip this step and become what they were today because of a victory in a competition? In order to answer these questions, he would probably need a large number of explorers like Thunder. However, the most important goal now was to fight against the demons and solve the problem of survival. Roland believed that as long as he had enough time, he would be able to piece together the original appearance of this world step by step. Has this relic always been kept by the church? No, the Starfall City? He looked at Pasha. Now that he knew this information, it was especially important to protect the relic. Yes, because of the existence of the giant painting, finding a place to bury the relic was just a way to cover one's ears while stealing a bell. It could not prevent the arrival of the Battle of Divine Will, so it has always been guarded by the most powerful witch organization. In addition, magic power was unusually active during the months of demons, and demonic beasts attacked Hermes crazily because of the relic. Pasha moved her huge body so that Roland could see the scene behind her. The corpses of demonic beasts were piled up into two small hills, and light blue blood flowed all over the ground. When we learned that the Starfall City had suffered a heavy blow, we immediately retrieved the relic. Now it is very safe in our hands. How did you stop so many hybrid demonic beasts? Vendi gasped. The instrument of divine retribution can target and strip the magic power from the target. Without the support of magic power, these mutated monsters will soon die. Pasha briefly explained the principle of the instrument of divine retribution. But only when the Chosen One activates it can it truly become a powerful weapon. Strip the magic power. Magic power stripping. Roland keenly noticed that it couldn't be used against ordinary creatures. Can the God's Stone defend against the effect of the instrument? No, and it directly works on magic power. The barrier of the God's Stone doesn't work on it. To be able to cover more than 10 miles without any side effects, this was a pretty good environmental weapon. It was just that the activation conditions were a bit too harsh. He suspected that the underground civilization had only verified this point in theory and had never actually verified it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have fallen to the point of being eliminated. Perhaps only in the age of magic would there be such a miraculous sight to be able to create something that they could use. Without a doubt, compared to the underground civilization and the devils who could nurture many abilities, humans were naturally inferior in this aspect. The random awakening and the erratic use of magic power showed the instability of the witches. Perhaps if they were given enough time, they would be able to reach a higher limit, but what they lacked now was exactly time. By the time the Tequila witches found the Chosen One, the steel torrent of Neverwinter would have already reached the demons. Besides, since magic existed in this world, he would not turn a blind eye to it. Therefore, the simplest method was to conduct research on both at the same time, using mana to boost productivity, and then using the rich resources brought by increased productivity to support mana research. He believed that any research project could be carried out with money and manpower, and magic power was no exception. Having learned everything he needed to know, Roland knew that it was time to negotiate. I've roughly understood your situation. First of all, there's no doubt that the demons are our common enemy. It's very necessary to establish a united front of divine will and strengthen mutual assistance and cooperation. What do you think? I completely agree, Pasha said while nodding her tentacles. The tequila witches don't ask for much. We only hope that your majesty can continue to recruit witches and let Phyllis find the chosen one. We'll send another god's punishment witch to bring new 5-colored magic stones. That's easy. Whether you have this request or not, I'll expand the number of witches. But... He paused and said, I think you should live in another place, such as in the west of the mountain range closer to Neverwinter. This. Your Majesty. What about the demonic beasts? Everyone looked at him, some worried and some worried. Only Agatha's eyes were full of approval, as if she had known that he would do this. Roland looked around and gestured for them to rest assured. Then he looked straight at Pasha on the light screen and said, to be honest, I don't agree with your idea of keeping the relic alone. Once something goes wrong, all our efforts will be in vain. It's not a big deal to attract demonic beasts, but now without Hermes's towering defense line, if the demons launch a surprise attack, are you sure you can defend it? Regardless of whether the disappearance of the underground civilization had anything to do with the relic, Roland would rather believe it than not. It was better to keep such an important relic under his care. At least, he could quickly send reinforcements when the tequila survivors were attacked. As long as the Annihilation Core is replaced, there's no essential difference between demons and demonic beasts. Celine was not convinced. Of course there are. Demons are much more powerful and cunning than hybrids. From those corpses, we can see that they once approached your core area. If I'm not wrong, your instrument of divine retribution should be not far from the phantom instrument, right? After saying this, Roland noticed that the tiny tentacles on Pasha's body slightly stiffened. If it were the spear-throwing demons, how many magic cores could be preserved? But if you think I can't do a better job, or worry about the relic attracting demonic beasts, you can settle in the front of the western mountain range, near the fertile plains. I'll open a direct mountain road behind you. In this way, even if you encounter danger that you can't handle, Neverwinter can still help you, Roland said frankly. Trust is the foundation of cooperation. Only by placing the relic in a place that both sides think is safe can we establish the most basic trust, right? Pasha stopped talking for a while. The tentacles on her head intertwined with other sarcomas, as if she was communicating with her companions in this way. After about a quarter of an hour, her voice rang out again. Chapter 740. Faced with this question, Roland was stunned at first, and then he could not help but raise the corner of his mouth. You seem to have something else to say. Because it concerns the survival of everyone, we hope that every decision can be fully considered, so. Tequila proposes a joint governance system. In the United Front, the leaders of the most powerful groups would jointly negotiate and issue orders, which could effectively avoid wrong judgments and ensure that all parties had the same interests. Sounds like the three chiefs system of the Union. 3 was a suitable number. It could achieve a better balance between the speed of decision-making and the unity of decision-making. Of course, considering the current 4 kingdoms and the witch organizations, it was not necessary to use the 3 chiefs to make decisions. For example, in the early days of the Union, a roundtable parliament composed of 11 leaders made up a battle plan. The ancient witch explained. This is undoubtedly a smart decision, Roland thought. Except for Neverwinter, the rest of the human kingdoms, the Witch Union, and Sleeping Island, could not have an advantage over the tequila survivors in terms of strength. The more than 100 perfect gods punishment soldiers did not seem to be a lot, but when faced with ordinary troops and witches, their combat effectiveness was almost overwhelming. In addition, they had fought fiercely with the demons for decades, so they could be said to be rich in actual combat experience. Moreover, they had inherited the magic relics of the underground civilization, so they could be regarded as a force that could not be ignored. If the seats were arranged according to strength, they would definitely occupy a seat in the decision-making group. After that, As long as they maintained communication with other witch organizations and strengthened the natural sense of identity, they could ensure the interests of the tequila. They might not have any other plans, such as restoring the dominant position of the witches, or turning against the human kingdoms and so on. It was just a cautious act of self-preservation, which was the demand of almost any organization before joining a large group. If it were the new Roland, he might have agreed, but now he was no longer the prince who had just taken over the position of lord and only governed a small border town. Interesting proposal, but the United Front will not implement a joint governance system. It will only have one leader, and that's me. Roland said in an indisputable tone, this is the most efficient and the most stable way. Modesty was a virtue, but now was definitely not the time for modesty. The three-leader co-governance might be a good choice for the Union, but it was definitely not the case for him. In this world, he was the only one who understood what was needed for industrialization and how to bring out the greatest potential of the territory. In order to build this framework, all the departments had to become a unified machine, a qualified screw. The orders from City Hall had to be sent to every citizen unimpeded, and the resources had to be coordinated and allocated. If all the policies had to be explained to the other seats, or if the participants whose interests were at stake were to be persuaded, industrialization would not be able to take a big step forward. Probably because his refusal was too direct, the scene became silent for a while. Even the ancient witches were stunned and did not say a word for a long time. Roland cleared his throat and said, a united front is indeed a guarantee against the demons, but I didn't ask you to join in the first place. Moving to the western region is just a basis for building trust. Compared with these verbal agreements, I hope you can see it with your own eyes. Look at what? The strength and determination of Neverwinter to fight against the demons, as well as the organizations that have joined us or not, their interests and current situation. On the basis of a full understanding, you can make a free choice, Roland said frankly. Even if you can't make up your mind, we can carry out the most basic cooperation, such as looking for the chosen one, providing experimental materials, and so on, as long as we don't interfere with each other's policies. It's the same even if we don't give you the relics and magic cores? Celine interrupted. It's the same. Roland nodded. In fact, I never intended to defeat the demons with the relics. As for the relics of the gods, as long as they are placed in a place where both sides can ensure their safety, I can accept it. As I said before, looking for the chosen one and ensuring the safety of the relics is the most basic trust. As for the other things, we can cultivate them slowly. I admit that you're extraordinary, mortal. The cold voice from before once again appeared in everyone's mind, but have you ever thought that if one person is in charge of the United Front, it means that there is no room for succession? If the battle of Divine will lasts for decades, when you're exhausted, will your descendants still be able to follow your will and continue to lead the people forward? Only a joint governance system can effectively avoid these problems. I don't think you need to worry about this. Let's not talk about whether the demons can hold on for so long. I'm afraid my lifespan will be longer than all of you combined. Roland did not know whether Zero's lifespan would be inherited by him. After all, her magic power was not preserved, but at this moment, he felt that it was necessary to bluff. Rather than using a system that he had never heard of to convince the other party that the successor's will would not change, it was better to directly explain everything with an unimaginable ability. After a brief description of the characteristics of the soul battlefield, coupled with the unanimous approval of the witches, the living room fell into a long silence. He saw the tentacles of the sarcoma entangled again, and the scales on its body changed from grayish-brown to brown with a hint of red. Obviously, the debate had entered the most intense stage. After a long time, the tentacles dropped down. I see. Pasha's voice became much more serious. But there are too many things to move in the ruins, which can't be accommodated by any random cave, so this process will take about a month. In addition, we also need to rebuild the underground palace and laboratory in the western mountain range. I hope you can provide some materials for us. Wait, how are you going to do this? Roland was a little surprised. At first, he had planned to let Lotus connect the countless holes in the underground and give them a simple shelter. After all, It was dark and damp underground, and the bodies of the tequila survivors were not in the category of human beings, so they should not have too many requirements for the living environment. However, it seemed that the other party had amazing construction skills and was planning to build a new palace in the mountain rocks. Chapter 741. Wait a minute, Roland thought. Why does this thing sound like the giant demonic beasts near the Great Snow Mountain? Similar to wild beasts? Before he could ask, Agatha said, "Are you the ones who entered Devil's Town and swallowed the Blackrock Tower?" Devil's Town. Apart from repairing the ruins and opening up the passage to the City of Glow, we didn't let the devouring worm go anywhere else. After all, it consumes too much food, and we can't afford it. Roland briefly explained the visions the witches had encountered in the Misty Forest and the west of the Western region, and asked Scroll to fetch the picture of the giant beast drawn by Soroya. The traces of the two monsters point to a huge snow mountain, which is much larger than the wild beasts. It is indeed the devouring worm. Pasha took a deep breath after looking at the lifelike picture. I'm afraid that the snow mountain you mentioned also has a relic of the underground civilization. According to the literature, they once spread all over the land of Dawn, and wherever there were mountains, there were traces of the worms. This could be seen from the inside of the mountains that were full of holes. This record was not exaggerated. But you think that the underground civilization has completely disappeared? Yes, but the worm is just a body. It can be used in the same way as the original carrier. As long as you transfer a part of the soul, you can control it. Hearing this, Roland's heart sank. He looked around and found that the witches in the room also looked serious. Obviously, everyone thought of the same thing. The worms had attacked twice, once against Agatha's research tower, and the other time against Devil's Town. After eliminating the three forces, the only remaining possibility was that race that had yet to show up. Did they find the relic in the snow mountain and possess the worm's body? If that was the case, it was not a big deal. Thinking along this line of thought, what if there was also a magic core and central carrier in the snow mountain relic? Would the other race greatly improve their magic theory and create an instrument of divine retribution for the witches? In addition, according to the records, the grander the mountain, the larger the city built by the underground civilization. Although the snowy mountains were not as undulating as the impassable realm and Dragon's Pine Ridge, the main peak was the highest in this area. If there really was a large number of bodies there, he would definitely not leave them alone. Your Majesty, please help us explore this snowy mountain. Celine suddenly said anxiously, if the finished instruments are stored there. There are also the various carriers mentioned in the documents. If they fall into the enemy's hands, I'm afraid they will bring us great trouble. Pasha's voice sounded calm, but judging from her twitching tentacles, her emotions weren't any lower than Celine's. At the same time, there was a clamor of discussion behind the sarcoma. Obviously, this news had caused an uproar among the tequila survivors. Roland quickly understood why they were so excited. Compared with the senseless bodies of the gods' punishment army, the carrier was much better in this respect, although it had completely lost its human form. At least it could feel cold, hot, sore, and had a certain sense of smell. After being locked in a cage of nothingness for hundreds of years, it was no wonder that they were so concerned about the news of a new carrier. Your concerns are indeed very reasonable. He pretended to ponder. I've been planning to explore the snowy mountains of the western region, but I lacked an effective means of transportation. I didn't want the witches to take risks alone, so I had to postpone it. If we can cooperate with the devouring worm, it will be a good opportunity. We'll start the migration as soon as possible, Pasha replied solemnly. They had been discussing ways to cooperate, but they didn't expect the opportunity to come so soon. In fact, even without the other party's request, Roland would have launched an internal investigation into the snowy mountains. In addition to the need to eliminate the possible threats around Neverwinter, he was also very interested in this carrier that could easily open a large underground tunnel. With a little imagination, he could understand how extensive its uses were. Previously, he had planned to turn the impassable mountain range into a natural barrier against the demons, but it was not easy to achieve this in engineering. The road between the mountains was rugged and steep, and the climate changed greatly. Just the transportation of cement and bricks was a headache. In addition, if you wanted to station the troops for a long time, in addition to the stronghold battery, the barracks, roads and other necessary living facilities had to be built near the fortifications, which was a great challenge for Hummingbird, Lotus and the others. However, with the devouring worm, he could completely open a straight tunnel from the back of the mountain and directly connect the defense points on each mountain to the hinterland of Neverwinter. The ammunition storage and barracks built underground could effectively avoid the attacks of the snowstorm, and the flat tunnel could be paved with rails, which could be used to transport soldiers and supplies by steam trailers. The reinforced concrete blockhouse above was the true meaning of the natural moat defense line, and the living area and transportation lines were below. In addition, the underground pipelines and sewage network, which were indispensable for the construction of the city, were not a problem for the devouring worm. He could even claim that in this era, Neverwinter already had an underground drainage system that could allow people to pass through unimpeded. It could be said that before the shield tunneling machine was invented, this thing was simply a divine tool in the civil engineering field, and its function was no less than the instrument of divine retribution and the biological computer. I hope this is the beginning of building trust between us. Roland stood up, walked to the light curtain, and reached out his right hand to the other party. Your Majesty, this is. A handshake means that both sides have reached a preliminary consensus, he said calmly, looking at the giant creature that was several meters taller than him. The latter hesitated for a moment, and then stretched out the thickest tentacle on its head, which spiraled down and touched his palm. Unfortunately, Soroya is not here, Roland thought. Otherwise, this scene would probably be recorded in history. When the illusion connecting the two places began to distort, he suddenly asked, "By the way, you said that there may be traces of the underground civilization in every mountain. What about the mountains under the sea?" "There are mountains under the sea. According to the historical records, their range of activities is limited to the Land of Dawn, and there are no signs of them going to the sea. Because most of the carriers are extremely heavy, it is not convenient for them to move in the water." "Why do you ask this?" "Nothing, I'm just a little curious," Roland shook his head. "They only appear in the Land of Dawn. It seems that the strange underwater spire and telescope have nothing to do with them. However, the giant stone gate that the old telescope was staring at, as well as the continent that could only be reached at high tide, whose territory was it? Is it a third party that has been hiding in the dark? I hope Thunder can find the answer." While he was thinking, the purple light curtain distorted and disappeared without a trace. Chapter 742. After nightfall, Vendi came to the door of Scroll's bedroom. She reached out her hand and was hesitating whether to knock on the door when the door was opened. It was Scroll standing behind the door. "I knew you would come to me." Scroll smiled. "Because I also want to talk to you, just like in the past." Scroll had obviously finished her bath early. Her long wet hair was not tied up as usual, but casually fell on her shoulders. To prevent her robe from getting wet, she also put a towel on her shoulders. The ends of her hair covered her forehead and also hid the wrinkles left by the years. Coupled with the increasingly comfortable life, her skin became plump, and at first glance, she looked much younger. The only thing that did not change was her pair of wise eyes that belonged to an older person. Vendi could not help but smile. "In your room or mine?" "Yours. Nightingale will come back later than Leaf." "Okay. You pay for the chaos drinks." "Oh. Of course, the one who asks first is responsible for the drinks." "Old rules." "That's why you were waiting for me at the door." "Yes, patience is very important. This is also one of my life experiences." "Have you learned it now?" "Okay." The two returned to the bedroom and cleaned the desk. Vendi took out 2 cups and a bottle of chaos drinks from a drawer and filled the cups. The orange-red liquid reflected a flame-like luster under the reflection of the magic stone. "You actually drew this?" Scroll took a sip. "Good luck. Drinking it in winter is not much worse than drinking fire dragon wine." That's why I said you earned it, Vendi said, spreading out her hands. Don't say that. We all owe it to Miss Evelyn. His Majesty distributed such a variety of drinks to the members of the Witch Union in an interesting way. Every month, everyone had the opportunity to draw a bottle of chaos drinks made by Evelyn. Since they could only see the number before the answer was revealed, no one knew which flavor they would receive. Therefore, exchanging or freeloading food and drinks became an important part of the distribution day. For some reason, Maggie always got the most popular drink, which made people think that Evelyn had leaked it to her. The two of them slowly savored the heartwarming fiery red sweet drink while listening to the howling cold wind outside the window. Compared to the room that was filled with heating, this feeling was undoubtedly intoxicating. They rarely spoke. Sometimes, they could understand each other's thoughts just by looking at each other. In fact, Vendi didn't have anything specific to say. She was just happy from the bottom of her heart. Even now, when she closed her eyes, Roland Wimbledon's words would appear in her mind. There can only be one leader, and that is me. Before this, although she felt that His Majesty was very approachable, she was worried that he would hesitate on some key issues or show weakness that was not suitable for a king. Now it seemed that he was even better than she had expected. Judging from His Majesty's tone and expression when negotiating, the experience of the past 2 years had made him more stable and decisive. What was even more incredible to Vendi was that although Roland had become more mature as a leader, his attitude towards witches and ordinary people was still the same. It was as if it was an instinct of his. Compared to the former, this was the most unimaginable point, especially for a noble of the royal family. She knew that Scroll had also felt this change, which was why she was waiting for her at the door. This was also a habit passed down from the time of the Witch Cooperation Association. When they encountered something good and wanted to share it, Vendi, Scroll, and Kara would always get together, drink a few glasses of poor quality ale, and talk for a whole night. Later, as the conditions became more and more difficult, they could not even drink wine often, so they switched to drinking wild fruits. Unfortunately, as Kara gradually drifted away from them, the good things that could be shared or the beautiful plans for the future gradually turned into worry and confusion. In the end, only Vendi and Scroll were left, encouraging and supporting each other. As the two oldest among the sisters, and also the founders of the Witch Cooperation Association, once they fell, everyone would lose confidence in finding the Holy Mountain. During those extremely difficult days, the two of them had walked all the way. At this moment, it was as if the past had reappeared. By the way, Vendi drank the drink in one gulp and let out a long breath. After the meeting, I gave the test results of the witches in the Kingdom of Wolfheart to His Majesty. Oh. What kind of abilities did they have? Scroll leaned back on the bench and replied casually. Vendi roughly described the abilities of the 4 witches, and deliberately kept Scroll guessing when it came to Broken Sword. Guess who he assigned Broken Sword to? Well, it should be Nightingale or Ashes. Only the two of them can give full play to Broken Sword's power. Scroll thought for a moment and said, although Anna and Leaf have powerful magic power, they are not suitable for fighting the enemy head-on, and the other sisters are almost the same. There are not many real combat witches in the Witch Union. I think the same as you, but His Majesty doesn't think so. Vendi showed a gentle smile. He didn't assign Broken Sword to anyone. Scroll was slightly startled and asked, why? Because he said that weapons generally have to be carried with them, which is tantamount to restricting Broken Sword's freedom. Moreover, the enemy can't always arrive during working hours, and sword energy is not necessarily more powerful than guns. So, instead of becoming a weapon, it is better to cooperate with each witch to test the superimposed effect, and then determine the work according to whether it is interesting or not. According to the degree of interest? Yes, that's what His Majesty said. Compared to considering the use of witches, His Majesty first cared about the other party's feelings. It was probably because of this that Nightingale chose to support him unreservedly. Now that they thought about it, it was fortunate that they finally believed in Nightingale's judgment. Thinking of this, Vendi could not help but grin. She filled up her cup and raised it in front of Scroll. I hope we find a good king. The latter smiled and gently clinked her cup with hers. Yes, to the holy mountain. Ah, it's empty. After taking a sip, when Vendi wanted to pour more, she found that the bottle of chaos drink had been emptied by the two of them. Should I go back and get my bottle? Scroll also seemed to want to continue. No, since it's an old rule, we have to abide by it. She waved her hand and took out a new bottle of chaos drink from another drawer. But next time, I won't knock on the doors so quickly. Wait, this is Nightingale's, isn't it? Yes, she won't mind. Chapter 743. Roland wiped the sweat off Anna's forehead and held her in his arms. In the dim light, he could see the alluring blush on the girl's face. Since the last time they talked about the dream, Roland felt that Anna had become more proactive in this aspect. She would also work hard to learn some new skills, but compared to the knowledge in books, her progress in this area was much slower. Looking at Anna's clumsy and serious expression was a completely new experience for him. The visual enjoyment even surpassed the sensory experience, and a sense of superiority welled up in him. Of course, after the pleasure, there was always a time to tell stories. Sniffing Anna's fragrance, Roland told her the new news brought by the tequila witches, as well as his speculation about the Battle of Divine Will. Although I knew that we were only in a corner of the continent, I didn't expect that there was a civilization that was completely different from ours under the mountains. This world is really full of unknowns. Anna sighed. Maybe one day, we can also set foot on that faraway land and see what kind of secrets are hidden in the world across the sea. There will definitely be such a day, I promise, Roland replied with a smile. Even if they couldn't travel by sea, they could still fly over and use binoculars to see the land, so it wouldn't be too far. Once they had the internal combustion engine, large airships would have a place to use. But, is there really a god in this world? Leaving behind a relic that urges us to kill each other. Maybe it's watching us from somewhere. Are you afraid? Roland could not help but tighten his arms and pull her closer. No, I have to thank it. Why? He was slightly stunned. Because it sent you to me, Anna raised her head and said softly. Roland saw the rippling blue light in her eyes. It was her undisguised feelings. He felt a surge of warmth in his heart. I will always be with you. But you can't always be by my side. Before he could finish his sentence, Anna covered his mouth. You're the king and the future commander of the demon army. How can you stay in Neverwinter all the time? I can't occupy all of you for my own selfish desires. The soldiers fighting on the front lines need to see your figure, and the people of other cities also hope that you can be with them. She said softly, Roland, I'm already very satisfied to be able to listen to your stories like this. Roland was silent for a moment. You're right, but no matter where I am in the future, you'll be able to hear my stories. I can guarantee that. Anna blinked as if she understood what he meant. Not relying on the sigil of listening? That's right, he nodded. If the words of love between two people had to be conveyed through the sigil of listening, then how could they be spoken? How do I do it? You'll know tomorrow. Roland turned over and pressed Anna under his body, then kissed her neck. Then slid down from her neck to her collarbone, leaving a shallow mark on her fair and tight skin. But now, it's my turn. The two of them kissed again, and the sound of their sweet breaths echoed for a long time. After breakfast the next day, Roland walked into the backyard of North Slope Mountain with Anna in high spirits. Good morning, Your Majesty. Lucia, who had come earlier, put down her work and bowed to him. Good morning, Your Majesty. Good morning, Sister Anna. Sister Nightingale. Belle also imitated her sister, bowing cheerfully and shouting. Roland smiled and waved his hand, indicating that they did not need to be so polite. He then walked to the workbench, took out a piece of white paper, and started drawing a design. He intended to take advantage of the time when the tequila survivors had not migrated to the western region to fulfill the promise he made last night. A communication tool that did not require magic power to communicate with Anna at any time. That was the wired phone. The principle of the telephone was very simple, but it was the most basic application of the electromagnetic induction phenomenon. Sound waves caused the metal reed in the microphone to vibrate, causing it to change the magnetic flux in the magnetic field, and finally produced an induced current that fluctuated between large and small. The receiver, on the other hand, used the electromagnetic coil to produce a magnetic force that fluctuated between large and small, causing the diaphragm to vibrate and restore the current to sound. In other words, it was essentially the same as an electric motor, except that the latter turned vibration into rotation, and the power was much greater. When he explained his idea and design plan, Anna immediately understood how this unprecedented communication tool worked. "I'll call Mystery Moon and Soroya over." Her eyes lit up. Electric current and sound exchange? Nightingale was still confused after hearing this. She looked at Lucia as if she was looking for a sense of identity, but found that Lucia was lost in thought. Electricity and magnetism coexist, and magnetism is converted into force. I see. Even the little girl Belle exclaimed, "Sister, are you talking about the second chapter of elementary physics?" Nightingale was immediately shocked. She held a piece of dried fish in her mouth, turned around, and disappeared into the mist. Looking at this scene, Roland could not help but laugh. Having said that, it was not so easy to make a practical telephone. The problem lay in the signal transmission. Electric signals would be attenuated. This was why the telephone was not put into use on a large scale after it was developed in the early years. Once the distance was too long, it was difficult for the other side to hear what was said. It was not until people discovered the vacuum tube that could amplify electric signals that it quickly became popular. Electricity was not Roland's strong point. The books he wrote at the beginning basically did not touch on this aspect. Now, even with the help of the dream world, it was still quite troublesome for him to make the vacuum tube. Since he did not intend to amplify the signal, he could only start by reducing the attenuation. For example, increasing the size of the wire and reducing the route loss. The former was very easy to achieve. Anna's Blackfire could precisely process the required copper wire. According to the information in her memory, using a wire with a diameter of 4 mm could maintain a non-repeater communication for about 50 to 60 km, while the general telephone wire was only 0.4 to 0.6 mm. Although it was somewhat wasteful to do so, it could effectively avoid the trouble of signal amplification. Chapter 744. Together, they should be able to make a non-repeater communication range of about 100 kilometers, which could basically cover most of the residential areas in the western region. It would also allow Neverwinter to know the situation of the impassable mountain range defense line at any time. If they wanted to extend the range, they would have to use a signal amplification device. The reason why Roland chose to use a landline phone was not only that Anna's words had aroused his ambition, but also that the telephone itself was indeed a very versatile tool. Whether it was to control the political situation, strengthen the centralization of power, or help in commanding a war, it was of great significance. Another more important point was that the current industrial projects in Neverwinter had reached a saturation point. The new immigrants needed to go through primary education before they could be absorbed. The four giant industries, civil construction, mineral smelting, mechanical processing, and chemical production, had already occupied more than 90% of the qualified workers. Judging from their size and estimated scale, it would not be difficult for them to swallow up the 60,000 to 70,000 new immigrants in the western region. Since these industries were closely related to the future war, no one could suffer but the four giants. The most typical example was the bicycle factory, which Roland had built in high spirits at the beginning, but the number of bicycles produced so far was not even enough for the First Army. When there was a shortage of power, it would be the first to shut down. When there was a shortage of manpower, all the workers had to go to the steam engine factory to work overtime, which could be said to be a difficult life. Even after the Kingdom Avenue and Route 67 were built, the roads were basically filled with horse-drawn carriages from the Longsong area or other cities, because the border area did not raise horses, nor did it have supporting facilities such as stables. Even though the railway had begun to be laid, the scene of citizens happily riding bicycles between the two places still did not appear. Of course, Roland would never admit to Berev that it was his mistake. But now, when he was considering new facilities, he would first take into account the production potential of Neverwinter. The telephone happened to be a good tool that didn't require any production potential, and it didn't require manual maintenance. First of all, it would not be put into the civilian market. Whether it was for military communication or to connect the border area and the Longsong area, Roland only planned to use a one-to-one method to lay the cable. In this way, the wiring process could be saved, and there was no need to set up a complicated network. Second, the small number of telephones meant that Anna, Mystery Moon, and Soroya could make them in their spare time, and there was almost no need to use the city's production capacity. It wouldn't be too late to develop civilian communications after the electron tube was invented. Therefore, the wired phone was the most suitable project to research before the tequila survivors explored the Great Snow Mountain. The development of the telephone prototype was smoother than Roland had expected. In the afternoon, 2 simple magnetic telephones appeared in the backyard of North Slope Mountain. It didn't have a shell and looked like a combination of naked coils and magnets. It was equipped with a hand-cranked motor and a magnetic induction battery, Mini Dawn. Since he didn't need a lot of power, the finger-thick magnetic battery could last for at least a month, so he didn't plan to work on a dry battery alone for the time being. How do I use this? Mystery Moon asked curiously. Is my ability really so magical? Roland automatically ignored the latter half of the other party's sentence. It's very simple. Look carefully, this hand-cranked motor is responsible for the call signal. When the user shakes it, he grabbed the handle and turned it hard, and the magnetic bell on the other end suddenly made a ding-ding-dang-dang sound. At this time, it means that there is a call. Then he winked at Anna, who nodded and picked up the handset and the microphone. When the handset leaves the base, the switch pops up, which means that the voice line is connected, and then we can talk. The electric current for the transmission of the electric signal is provided by the Mini Dawn, so without Mystery Moon's copper rod, the phone can only ring but not transmit sound. Yes, yes. Mystery Moon stuck out her flat chest and nodded hard twice. Your Majesty, can I try to use it to speak? Soroya asked eagerly. Me too. Belle raised her hand high. Of course, no problem. As its creator, you are naturally qualified to be the first to experience this epoch-making communication tool, Roland said with a smile. There was no need to explain the significance of the telephone. It had completely changed human communication habits and closely connected the distant world. It was not an exaggeration to praise it too much. But the yard is so short, and the signal will hardly be attenuated. Just connect it with ordinary copper wire. Therefore, in this quiet place surrounded by the white forest, the crisp sound of the bell rang continuously. They could have talked directly, but everyone insisted on starting from scratch, starting from the handheld flashlight. There's really a sound. It sounds like Lucia's. What should I say? Let her guess who you are. Separated by the wall, the witches scrambled to shout into the microphone. For a moment, the sound of laughter echoed from both ends of the yard. Roland also tried it twice. To be honest, the prototype was not ideal. The sound was sometimes loud and sometimes soft, and there was a lot of noise. It could not be regarded as a qualified finished product. But he knew that the next step was to repeatedly adjust the size of the reed and the distance between the electromagnets to reach the best quality. Not long after, the handset was passed to Roland again. He smiled and shook his head, put the handset to his ear, and habitually said, "Hello?" But there was no reply except for the faint sound of the electric current. Almost as if their hearts were connected, he subconsciously guessed the person on the other side of the phone. Anna. Roland said softly. After a while, a slightly distorted answer came from the other side. I like you. Roland. After a day of protection, Nightingale went back to her bedroom, a little depressed. This was not the first time she felt like she did not understand anything. Every time this happened, the only thing that could comfort her was dried fish and ice cream bread. Well, now there was one more chaos drink. Seeing the intimacy between Roland and Anna, she felt a heartfelt envy, as well as a faint sense of sadness. She thought she would get used to it sooner or later, but the process was harder than she thought. The deeper the relationship, the longer the thorns would be. She now somewhat understood the meaning of Wendy's words. Walking to the table, Nightingale opened the drawer, but found that the bottle was empty. Did she take the wrong one? She opened the other drawer, and there was still an empty bottle. Wendy. My chaos drink. As soon as Nightingale turned around, she was hugged by her roommate. That proud chest almost made her breathless. Nightingale, how long have we known each other? Ever since you left the Quinn family in Silver City, we've been together, right? Yes, it's been almost 4 or 5 years, but my chaos drink, we've experienced so many dangers and hardships along the way to get to where we are today. Nothing can destroy the friendship between us, right? Of course, I've always treated you as half a sister. But my chaos drink. I finished your drink, sorry. Wendy hugged her tighter. I'll make it up to you next month. What? Finished it? Nightingale touched the empty bag of dried fish. The only thing that could comfort her was dried fish, ice cream bread, and chaos drink. Now, it was all gone. She heard a cracking sound in her heart. Chapter 745. When Iron Axe closed his eyes, he could feel the smell of yellow sand surrounding him. It was the 4th day since he entered the desert and the 3rd week since the first army left Neverwinter. At the end of this week, 2/3 of the winter would be over and the coldest period would be late winter. However, compared to the snowy western region of Greycastle, this place was much less affected by the months of demons. Although the sky was always grey, at least there was no biting north wind or ice and snow that could freeze the whole desert. Since Silver Stream did not converge with any river and most of the water flowed underground, the army could only move forward on foot. Iron Axe did not act according to the original plan, which was to wait for the 500 new recruits stationed in Steep Cliff City to be ready to march, and then mix them into the main force and move together. Instead, he left them to Brian and went ahead himself, striving to reach Iron Sand City as soon as possible. The new recruits might be able to stand still and pull the trigger, but marching on foot would only make them die in the desert. Even if there were 500 more people, they would not be of much help to the situation. Iron Axe knew that to achieve His Majesty's goal, they could not rely on artillery. The First Army was the capital to ensure the fruits of victory, not a means to conquer the Sand Nation. The Majins had a set of traditional solutions. As for the 500 new recruits, they only needed to occupy the Silver Stream Oasis and ensure that the vanguard troops would not be attacked from both sides. In the southernmost region, the oasis was a lifeline. No matter if they attacked or fled, they could not leave the oasis. Facing the neatly marching veterans, the Sand Nation tribes could feel the power from them even though they had never seen the power of guns. Along the way, no one stood up to question the army from Greycastle. Only when they filled their water sacks and replenished their food supplies did the Sand Nation people whisper behind their backs. At this speed, the First Army should be able to reach Iron Sand City before nightfall. I don't quite understand. Can the so-called holy duel take place at any time in any season? A beautiful blonde woman walked to Echo's side. Her fair skin formed a sharp contrast with the Osha clan princess. Even if it's an honor challenge between aristocrats, it's also allowed to refuse. After all, everyone has times when they're not in their best condition. In such cold weather, who wouldn't want to come out and fight all day and sleep by a warm stove? What I mean is, what if they don't agree to the holy duel? Iron Axe remembered that her name was Andrea, a combat witch who often followed Her Highness Tilly. According to His Majesty, Ashes, a mortal, was supposed to be the only foreign aid, but for some reason, she also came. When someone rushes into your house with an axe and kicks over your stove, you won't be able to do anything even if you don't want to. Ashes curled her lips. Do you think that this kind of contest that determines the life and death of a family will follow the hypocritical rules of the nobles? That's called a sneak attack or a massacre, not a duel, Andrea said disdainfully. Even if the Majins are barbarians, they should be able to distinguish this. Do you think everyone is as ignorant and incompetent as you? To say this in front of Hui Yin, you really are a knowledgeable person. Don't misinterpret what I mean. Iron Axe did not care about the barbarians. His Majesty had told him that Border Town did not care about one's family background. Compared to the Majins, he had a more important identity, which was that he was a resident of Neverwinter. When Hui Yin looked at him for help, he coughed twice and took the initiative to explain, Miss Andrea, you're not worrying too much. Although the holy duel can't be refused and both parties must be well prepared to be recognized by the three gods, a duel can't be started at will. First of all, the challenger must be qualified for the duel. What kind of qualification? First of all, it must be a complete Majin clan. Iron Axe briefly explained, one person can't represent a clan, even if he's the chief or the princess. This rule was made to prevent the victors from occupying 1/6 of the territory of Iron Sand City with only a dozen or so people. In addition, it also excludes foreigners from the scope of the duel. Iron Sand City allows foreigners to fight on behalf of the clan, but it doesn't allow them to occupy the core power. Doesn't that mean we're not qualified at all? Ashes raised her eyebrows and said, Hui Yin has been exiled for several years and the Osha clan no longer exists. Or should we start by looking for her surviving clansmen? No one can survive in the Endless Cape. Iron Axe shook his head and said, but we can try another way. For example, let Lady Silvermoon become the chief of a new clan. That's possible. Andrea was stunned. The Majins don't value bloodlines as much as you do. Compared with bloodline inheritance, strength is the most important thing. The commander-in-chief of the First Army said calmly, after the first condition is met, the clans that can stand firm in the small oases around Iron Sand City will be qualified for the duel. There are a total of 4 small oases, and the newly rising clans will usually fight around them. There are no rules or restrictions, so these 4 small oases are also called the Bloodstained Land. They're equivalent to admission tickets, right? Ashes said indifferently. You can think of it that way. In fact, these clans are generally divided into 2 categories. Iron Axe paused and said, challengers and watchdogs. Watchdogs? The golden-haired witch asked curiously. They're the obstacles set up by the top clans who don't want to see the order of Iron Sand City change greatly. This time it was Echo who answered her. With their huge resources and influence, they recruit a large number of warriors to form a mixed clan and take root in the small oases. Watchdogs don't challenge their masters to the Divine Saint duel, but they occupy the position of challenger. Although they can't enter Iron Sand City, they can live well with the water and food provided by the small oases. It sounds no different from a hound that is willing to gnaw on leftovers, Ashes sneered. This description is actually quite appropriate. Because the holy duel is full of variables, the big clans will try to win over or bribe the potential challengers stationed in the bloodstained land. At that time, my father didn't want to be a watchdog and insisted on the holy duel with the Iron Whip clan, but in the end. Echo's voice trailed off, obviously thinking of something sad. They'll pay for their treacherous behavior, Lady Silvermoon, Iron Axe comforted her. Now, death is not far away from them. So we have to find a challenger first, let Echo take over the position of chief, and then challenge the 6 big clans to a duel? Andrea asked. Chapter 746. Thuram's favorite thing to do was to sit on the 2nd floor of the tavern and enjoy the endless flow of customers downstairs. This was his tavern and his territory, so Thuram named it the Skull Wine Cup according to his own preference and redecorated it. He also hung a series of incomplete skulls at the entrance as a sign of the tavern. Even though 5 years ago, it wasn't called that. What was it called at that time? Fairy Forest or Fairy Garden? Anyway, it was not important anymore. Thuram took a sip of the strong wine filled with fire lantern fruit and let the hot taste fill his tongue. Such a weak name was not suitable for the blood-stained land. There were no fairies or fairies here, but there were as many bones as one wanted. After every battle, there would be a pile of corpses left on the outskirts of Iron Sand City. Compared with the easily rotten flesh, he preferred the bones buried in hot sand, especially the skulls. First of all, it could intimidate those who came to drink and make trouble and let them know what kind of place this was. Second, it could really hold wine, so he could buy fewer wine cups. After all, the former did not work for everyone. There were always some idiots born with deformed brains who thought that everywhere was like their own backyard and their opponents were no different from crying women. Fragile crockery and glass were not ideal containers in a place where troublemakers often roamed about. Thuram had developed a habit in recent years to look at each customer. The people who came and went could generally be divided into three categories: the half-dead, the moribund and the dead. Compared with their identities, he preferred to distinguish them in this way. The half-dead came for a very simple purpose: drinking, gambling, and playing with women. As long as they maintained their current behavior, they could basically finish the remaining half of the journey. Most of the moribund were watchdogs or challengers who came to inquire about the situation. They had already put their heads under the sword and might move away at any time. As for the dead, they were, of course, the troublemakers. Thuram's main target of observation was neither the half-dead nor the dead, because the former was boring and the latter could only bring a little joy when they were dead. He liked to look at the moribund the most. In them, Thuram could see himself when he was young. At that time, he was just like them, holding a sharp knife in his hand, in the blood-stained land envied by many clans, but his eyes were always looking at the Iron Sand City from afar. As he waited, his courage, hot-bloodedness and strength left him bit by bit until someone took his place and became the new master of the little oasis. He wagged his tail and begged for mercy to survive, becoming a part of the blood-stained lands. In the end, he turned from a dead to a half-dead. Even if one's life was placed under the blade of a knife, it was still possible for the dying to soar into the sky, like breaking out of a cocoon and spreading its wings, rising from the ashes. On the other hand, the half-dead would never have this opportunity. They could only find some entertainment as a form of comfort in the latter half of their lives. For example, passers-by who admired these oases, or died in the yellow sand, or became the new master of this place. At this moment, a subordinate pushed open the door and walked in, whispering a few words in his ear. "Oh. Are you sure you didn't miss here?" Thuram was startled. "That's what he said, and from the appearance of the woman beside him, it's very likely that she's a goddess." Thuram pondered for a moment before revealing a malicious smile. "Bring them in. Remember to put away your weapons. This guy isn't easy to deal with." "Yes. Look, now there's a big fun coming to the door." There were two visitors. Although their bodies were hidden under loose robes, he could still see that they were a man and a woman. When the tall man took off his hood and revealed his face in front of him, Thuram could not help narrowing his eyes. "I didn't expect to see you again, Iron Axe. There are more things you can't imagine than the stars reflected in the oasis. There's nothing strange about it." Iron Axe first helped the woman sit down, and then calmly sat opposite him. "But at this moment, you should know why I came." "Probably." Thuram shrugged. As an old Sand Nation, he was familiar with every holy duel in the Land of Fire. Some of the dying could rise from the ashes, but most of the dying had become completely dead. The Osha clan was one of them. Although he heard that some accidents happened during the duel, the result would not change. "It's just that you shouldn't have come back. The Iron Whip clan is no longer what it used to be." As a mixed-blood warrior of some renown, he had once thought of recruiting him. Even though he had become a subordinate of the watchdog, his initial ambition had not been completely extinguished. He imagined that one day, the clan could once again occupy the small oasis, and then take a step further and walk onto the sacred dueling ground. However, that was several years ago. As for now, he just wanted to have some fun. "Really? That's exactly what I wanted," Iron Axe said disapprovingly. I was worried that they had been driven out of Iron Sand City by other challengers and died in some corner. Now it seems that the three gods haven't completely fallen asleep yet. Thurum frowned. In his impression, the mixed-blood warrior was not a person who talked big. I understand your desire for revenge, but without the strength to match, it's tantamount to courting death. At this point, he looked at the silent woman. Even if the Osha clan has a divine lady, it's still difficult to reverse the gap between you and the Iron Whip clan. Most of the exiles are already dead. What can the two of you do? That's why I came to you, Thurum. Iron Axe's expression was very natural, but his words made Thurum's heart skip a beat. Is your clan still in this oasis? 8 years ago, you and the Osha clan were also challengers. You clearly had the opportunity to enter Iron Sand City, but in the end, you became a watchdog, and later, you were not even a watchdog. Seeing your clansmen become slaves of other clans, didn't you feel a trace of remorse? Now, a new opportunity is in front of you. Swear allegiance to Lady Drow Silvermoon, and you can touch the wall of Iron Sand City again. After being stunned for a while, Thurum finally laughed. Ha 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 ha. This was indeed a rare entertainment. There was nothing more interesting than watching a crazy Avenger walking towards destruction. But he did not expect that Iron Axe would try to divert the fun to him. So you want this little girl to become the new chief of the clan, and then launch a sacred duel? Even her father is just an equal to me, but now you want me to worship her as my master. Maybe you found some good helpers and can play some tricks in the duel, but what good will it do me? Gather the slaves, fight with the watchdogs, and then send you to Iron Sand City? Chapter 747. However, Iron Axe did not fly into a rage as Thurum had expected. In fact, it was difficult to see any change in his expression, which made Thurum slightly surprised. In the past, this mixed blood would never allow anyone to threaten the Princess of Osha, not even verbally. He could not help but turn his head to look at Drow Silvermoon and found that the Divine Lady did not react either, as if she did not care about her own safety. What on earth are they thinking? Thurum touched the god's stone of retaliation in his bosom, and the fierce expression on his face inevitably became a little stiff. In fact, I didn't expect you to defeat the watchdog. You didn't fight 8 years ago, so I know how bold you are. At least, you're much more timid than you are, Iron Axe said slowly. And this time, I didn't come back just for revenge against the Iron Whip clan. The first half of Iron Axe's words touched his sore spot, but the second half made him slightly startled. Not just for revenge. I will challenge the 6 clans and make Osha the leader of the clans, Iron Axe said word by word. Although the clans of Iron Sand City jointly managed this oasis, there was still a difference in status between clans. It was a matter of course that the strongest had the best area in the city. To climb to this position, one had to challenge the clans ranked at the top. For Osha, who had nothing, naturally, they had to defeat all 6 clans in order to occupy the core area of Iron Sand City. This was an idea only a madman would have. The road to the top could not be interrupted. The physical exhaustion of fighting 6 battles in a row was enough to make people desperate, not to mention facing the first-class Majin warriors. Generally speaking, after a holy duel, the warriors of the clan needed more than half a year to recover. As for those who had died in the battle, they had to be trained or recruited again. In other words, the more resources they had, the stronger their foundation. Wild Flame, the leader of the clans, had not given up the first position for decades. The Avenger is a difficult breed to categorize. Some of them rose to the sky, some lost everything. As for those who hesitated or simply gave up during the preparation process, there were many who hesitated or simply gave up. Therefore, they could be half dead, or dead, but there was no doubt that the madman would be the last. There was nothing to talk about. Thurum found that even his interest in having fun had disappeared. Revenge against the Iron Whip could be said to be overestimating one's own strength, but to become the enemy of the entire Iron Sand City? Just the thought of this news made him restless. In order to avoid getting himself into trouble, he shouted, "Kids, catch this guy," along with the woman. There were a total of 4 clansmen in the room, plus the 2 guards outside the door, all with sharp blades and god's stones. Even if Iron Axe was strong, it would be impossible for him to escape in a battle of 6 against 2. In addition, their weapons had already been taken away before they entered. If he killed the mixed bloods and handed over the Osha descendants to the Iron Whip clan, he should be able to get a lot of rewards. He thought that maybe he could become the watchdog of this small oasis again. Just then, the Osha princess also stood up. She let out a sarcastic chuckle, then lifted her hood and removed the thin veil on her face. Her black hair was loose and beautiful. Her subordinate was right. She was indeed a divine lady, but not the drow Silvermoon that Thurum was familiar with. No Sand Nation woman could have skin as white as snow as hers. His long black hair spread out like a waterfall, and his golden eyes shone with a dangerous light. "You are..." Thurum opened his mouth, but before he could finish his words, the woman had already easily dodged the incoming slash and punched one of her clansmen in the face. The black-haired goddess did not use any weapons, but her fists were more powerful than iron hammers. With a muffled sound, the clansman who was hit was sent flying, smashing through the wooden wall and falling from the 2nd floor to the 1st floor. Who? When he asked this question, the 2nd person also made a hole in the wall. The tavern was in an uproar. The cold wind rushed in, making the fire flicker. The divine lady did not stop. Every move she made seemed to be dancing with the wind, but the shadow magnified by the firelight sent a chill down Thurum's spine. Why? Shouldn't they all be wearing God's stones of retaliation? This kind of gemstone bought at a high price from the kingdom of Greycastle should give ordinary people a chance to fight against the divine lady, but why did it seem to be nothing in front of her? The 4th clansman also fell, vomiting blood. The divine lady went around to his back and kicked his spine, almost breaking his body in half. Even the diving force of a 4-winged eagle would not be as strong as this. No one could survive 1 round in front of her. After a few breaths, only Iron Axe, the divine lady, and Thurum were left in the room. "Come over here. Someone is making trouble on the 2nd floor of the tavern." "Where's the chief?" "Damn it. How did you guard the door?" "A guest was smashed to death." Hurried footsteps came from the staircase. Apparently, many people were rushing to the chief's room, but the tip of a long knife was already at Thurum's neck. Don't come in." A layer of cold sweat appeared on his forehead. Ignoring the stinging pain of the knife cutting through his skin, he shouted toward the door. "Chief! Get out of here, all of you! Now!" Thurum sadly found that Iron Axe was right. He was indeed much more timid than he was arrogant. Faced with the threat of death, the first thing he thought of was to compromise rather than fight back. Perhaps from the very beginning, he was not a dying man with the hope of resurrection, but a half-dead man who was overcautious and indecisive. "Can we have a talk now?" Iron Axe's tone did not change much. "What's the use of my promise? The watchdogs here are supported by the Iron Whip clan and the Cutbone clan. Do you think you can hide such a big commotion from them? Tomorrow, Iron Sand City will know the news." Thurum growled. "And I can't even gather all my clansmen in such a short time. Most of them have become slaves of other clans. Even if they're willing to come back, they can't stop the warriors trained by the big clans. If you don't want to die without a burial place, it's not too late to escape from the oasis. As I said before, I don't expect you to defeat the watchdogs." Thurum gritted his teeth. What did Iron Axe mean? If he really had such great strength, he could have directly become a challenger. Why did he do this? Unless the force behind him was not from the southernmost region. As soon as this idea came to his mind, the old chief felt a sense of fear rising from the bottom of his heart. Was that why the other party needed to use the clan's name to initiate a holy duel? Suddenly, 2 muffled thunders came from outside the window. The sound was not loud and seemed to come from a very far place. Strangely, Thurum did not see the lightning that cut through the night sky. Normally, it should have come earlier than the thunder. At the same time, Iron Axe's expression finally changed. Chapter 748. The light of the explosion flashed like a firefly in the night sky. Vanner raised his telescope and looked at the oasis in the distance. The twinkling torches became the best indicator of the target. The closer they were to Iron Sand City, the more torches there were. Thousands of leaping torches outlined the camp of the Sand Nation, which was also the main target of the artillery battalion. After a while, a rumble came from the depths of the oasis. "The landing point seems to be a bit off," muttered Cat's Claw, who was also observing. "There's nothing we can do. It's not easy to set up the cannons in the sand, so we can only use the first few shots as test shots." Jop took advantage of the conversation to load the next shell into the barrel. "Anyway, let's hit further away. If it falls on Sir Iron Axe's head, we'll all be finished. Don't worry, the tavern is far away from the camp. If we can hit it, the shooting manuals compiled by the sages will have to be rewritten." Rodney pulled the firing rope and said, "Ready. Fire." Vanner nodded. The two Longsong cannons once again produced a deafening roar. The flames spurted from the muzzles briefly illuminated the ground in front of them. The raised sand and dust slapped on their faces, causing them to involuntarily squint their eyes. The small oasis mentioned by the Sand Nation could not be regarded as a real town. It was just a camp formed by the clans outside Iron Sand City. None of the houses were made of bricks. Except for a few low-rise buildings and sentry towers made of wood, most of the rest were tents made of leather and cloth. Therefore, the killing effect of the Longsong cannons was surprisingly good. Vanner noticed that no matter where the shell fell, the surroundings would instantly darken, but soon light up again. The former was caused by the blast of the explosion, which overturned the tents and torches, while the latter was caused by the mixture of torch grease and flammable building materials, which formed a more dazzling pillar of fire. This was the first time that the artillery battalion of the First Army had used predistance measurement to arrange the artillery position according to the firing table. The result was not very ideal, but fortunately, the fragile and flammable targets more or less made up for this shortcoming. After several rounds of bombardment, the camp of the Sand Nation had already been set ablaze. Several balls of bright flames were spreading outwards, and with the help of the whistling night wind, it looked like the entire oasis was going to be set ablaze. Although he could not experience the shock brought by the bombardment at close range, Vanner could completely imagine what kind of predicament these so-called watchdogs were currently in. Unstoppable and unavoidable. This was the god of war that His Majesty had mentioned. Praise the cannon. Praise the large-caliber cannon. He proudly glanced at the gun battalion and machine gun squads lying in ambush in front of the camp, and once again rejoiced that he had made the right choice. In the future, the war would be dominated by the cannons. As for the flintlock, it would only be used to cover up the gaps and clean up the battlefield. It took Thuram quite a while to recover from the earth-shattering explosion. His ears were still ringing as if someone had slapped him in the face. Is that the thunder that Iron Axe mentioned? After the low thunder and sharp whistling sound, a sentry tower not far from the tavern was suddenly engulfed by a fireball, and the entire tower was instantly torn apart. At the same time, the violent explosion in his ears made him temporarily lose his hearing. Through the holes in the wall, he could see that many tents had been ignited by the splashing bonfire debris, and soon became bigger bonfires. People screamed and ran out of the bonfires, fell to the ground, and struggled, trying to put out the flames on their bodies. Unfortunately, only a few lucky people could do this. Some of the Sand Nation people near the sentry tower collapsed on the ground. Although they did not seem to have suffered any serious injuries, they could not stand up again. Damn it, this is not thunder at all. It's simply a heavenly fire that fell to the mortal world. Only Father God in the sky could have such terrible means. Thuram had thought that such a fierce attack would not last long, but he soon found that he was wrong. The thunder would be heard every quarter or so, followed by the fireballs and explosions. He also noticed that the fireballs were scattered at first, but it did not take long for them to gradually gather at the center of the oasis, where the watchdogs gathered. Compared with the vassal clans, the watchdogs naturally occupied the most fertile territory in the oasis. However, at this moment, it had become a hell. Columns of fire rose up, as if the sky was burning. The way he looked at Iron Axe had completely changed. By the three gods, this is not the power you should have. Thurum said in a hoarse and trembling voice, "Who did you seek refuge with?" "Those northerners." "A benevolent king," Iron Axe replied, "who will bring the oasis and order to the Majin Sand Nation." "This can't be." Thurum subconsciously wanted to say the word, impossible, but when he saw the spreading sea of fire in the oasis, the last syllable seemed to be stuck in his throat and could not be uttered. Unfortunately, not everyone will be willing to accept such order. The oasis breeds the Sand Nation, but it also imprisons their thoughts. Killing and framing are all because of the struggle for survival, but the oasis that breeds life is soaked in blood. I have to say that it's ironic. As for the watchdogs, which are obviously used to maintain the power of the big clans and let the clansmen suffer in the yellow sand and dry land, it's even more stupid and short-sighted. I wouldn't be surprised if these words came from the northerners, but Iron Axe. Thurum shook his head with difficulty. You're obviously a mixed blood born in the desert. How can you have such a naive idea? It's impossible that you don't know that if we don't kill and plunder, the limited oasis can't accommodate our growing population. Unless the Majins have the power to overwhelm Greycastle, it's impossible for them to break out of this desert. Cooperation and allegiance will only lead to death. The Northerners will never really trust us. The Blackbone clan and the Sandstone clan are the best proof. For a fertile territory, the two clans that had the opportunity to settle in Iron Sand City turned to the Queen of Clearwater, Garcia. But what was the result? It was said that all of them were fed a strange pill, and in the end, they turned into rotten flesh and blood. The land promised to them as a reward became empty words in the end. There's no real trust. Iron Axe showed a trace of emotion. I thought so at first. But the fact tells me that there are always some people who are born to break the rules. Suddenly, there was a rapid sound of hooves outside the tavern, and it became more and more frequent. Thurum did not need to look to know that it was the Watchdogs' counterattack team gathering. They may have lost the courage to advance, but they did not lose their skills and horsemanship. As long as the enemy appeared near the oasis, they would pounce on the target like bloodthirsty sandworms. When he was about to warn Iron Axe grabbed his collar and pulled him to the window. Not far away, he saw more jumping torches running toward the desert outside the oasis. It seemed that this group of watchdogs had already smelled the scent of their opponents. However, both Iron Axe and the black-haired divine lady looked particularly at ease, as if they did not care about this cavalry team at all. Chapter 749. Night was not a good time to fight. Neither the sun nor the moon could be seen in the months of demons. The dim, cold light shone on the uneven desert. The side facing the light could still vaguely see the outline of the desert, but the side facing the light could not even see the fingers of one's hand. Therefore, torches were indispensable for both offense and defense. When scattered sparks appeared in the direction of the oasis, Danny carefully wiped a clip clean, then inserted it into the loading port, pulled the bolt, and loaded the gun. The enemy is coming. Watch out. I can see it. He first imitated the Malt's voice, and then answered to himself. In this way, it was as if Malt was still with him, acting as a protector and fighting side by side with him, even though he was no longer a member of the precision shooting team. Danny returned to the gun camp after his confinement, but Brian soon found him and brought him a brand new gun. It was the one he was holding in his hand. Although it looked no different from the bolt guns used by the precision shooting team, Danny realized that it was not an ordinary gun as soon as he held it in his hand. It was like a long sword with a similar shape, but some were just casually made by blacksmiths for practice, while some were precious swords that could cut a hair. The metal part of the gun gave off a unique dim light, and its surface was as smooth as a young girl's skin. All the joints were so smooth that they seemed to be carved by a knife or an axe. It felt natural and did not sting at all. What surprised Danny the most was that a monocular telescope could be installed on the top of the gun. The surface of the telescope was engraved with two straight intersecting lines, and the center of the lines was where the bullets would land. He did not know how this was achieved, but through the telescope, the blurry and small long-distance targets became much clearer, which, in a sense, extended the shooting range of the gun. The subsequent shooting training also proved his feeling. The shooting accuracy of this new gun was much higher than that of the common bolt guns. In windless or breezy conditions, he was 90% sure that he could hit the head of a human-shaped target within 500 meters. Danny was so touched that he almost shed tears on the spot when he learned that this weapon was specially made for him by His Majesty. Although he had made a disciplinary mistake, His Majesty had not given up on him and had given him the right to freely choose his firing position in the position. There was no other way for him to treat His Majesty than to kill himself. However, when Brian asked him if he had any protectors he wanted to pick, Danny rejected him without hesitation. He already had his own protector. This gun. And Malt. More and more flames appeared in their field of vision, like stars reflected in the sea of sand. This was within the commander's expectations. Before every battle, the superiors would explain the battle intent and objectives in detail to each platoon so that they would know how far the battle would end. For example, the bonfires on the cannons and the firing rate of once every 7 minutes were all to lure the enemy to launch a counterattack, thereby weakening the combatants of the Watchdog clan as much as possible in preparation for the general attack after dawn. The brightly lit position would allow the enemy to notice any abnormalities, and controlling the firing rate would prevent the rapid and fierce bombardment from directly scattering the enemy. Of course, Danny knew that the artillery battalion could not do that. They looked down on others all day long, but they did not know how much resources they occupied. The firearms and ammunition carried by the gun battalion could be carried by one soldier, but what about the artillery battalion? Without the help of the witch named Hummingbird, they could not even transport food into the desert. There were more than a dozen carriages, and more than half of them were loaded with artillery shells and machine gun ammunition. Only 2 howitzers could be placed in such a large wooden box. If they were to fight as they did in the drill, the 2 Longsong cannons would be able to use up all the ammunition they carried in less than an hour. What would happen after that? They could only watch helplessly. Although Danny admitted that the drill showed unparalleled power, he always felt that every shot was like a golden dragon. However, those people regarded this power as their own. They were simply too arrogant. Without the support of His Majesty's rich treasury, they could only eat dirt in front of the gun battalion. Therefore, the fear of scattering the enemy was just a nice-sounding excuse. Ultimately, they wanted to keep some stocks in case of accidents. After all, it would take a week or 2 for the new recruits to open the Oasis supply line and deliver new ammunition. When the first group of firelight entered the ambush circle of the First Army, Danny put the cross-shaped telescope in front of his eyes. Wind direction, to the north, strong. Target, about 700 meters away. Thank you. You're welcome. He murmured and put his finger on the trigger. Considering that the accuracy of fighting at night would be greatly reduced, he did not leave the position too far this time and chose to shoot head-on. In this way, even if the enemy rode fast on horses, they would not be able to move too far in his field of vision. The Sand Nation was indeed a barbarian tribe that was good at fighting on horseback. At first, there were only scattered firelight, but when they charged, they had already formed a neat front line. The horses' hooves sounded in unison, like a gradually accelerating drum beat. At the same time, they dropped the torches in their hands and pulled out their dull sabers. At this distance, the intermittent roars of the artillery position were the most eye-catching target. The backlit sand dunes on both sides suddenly flashed with continuous light spots. Tut, 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 the crisp sound of machine guns blended with the charging drum beat, announcing the official start of the ambush. Without the field artillery, the heavy machine guns became the weapon with the longest range. Bullets swept toward the charging line like a stream of water, and the desert suddenly boiled. Unexpectedly, screams, curses, and shouts broke out in the crowd. The shadows in the night seemed to move a little faster. And Danny was oblivious to it. He only focused on the first enemy that rushed forward. 500 meters, I got you. It was not easy to find a target on a moonless night. He could only vaguely distinguish the charging figure of the enemy. But this was not a shooting show, and he did not need to hit the head to score a point. Whether it was the horse or the rider, being shot in any part of the body could kill them. Danny pulled the trigger, and the gun trembled slightly. He smelled the hot smell of gunpowder. He could not see the point of the bullet, and there was no blood. The enemy just trembled and fell off the horse. This was his hunting ground, Danny thought, and this was where he should be. Did you see that, Malt? Don't get distracted. The next target is coming. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.